Got it. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Clay. Let's call the meeting to order. And Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ron.
Here.
Joycelyn. Gordon.
Here.
John.
Here.
Michael.
Here.
Lori. Yummy.
Here.
Brett.
Here.
Noel.
Here.
Rita. Susan. Michelle.
Here.
Joycelyn.
Here.
Okay, thank you. So everyone is here except for Lori and Rita. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So,
Welcome.
the question, we have a quorum. Next matter I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda, which includes approval of the minutes and the report of expenses.
I'll so move.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
Second's been moved and second that we approve the consent agenda. So all in favor, please state aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed or abstain? Okay, it's passed. The next matters are awards and recognition. Steve?
Susan, Teresa, are you aware of any?
No, I don't have it.
I'll mention this. This is it's a little self-serving, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Reference use and user service division of ALA. So there are different divisions of ALA. PLA is a division of ALA. RUSA, the reference and user service association of ALA, has invited me to present their president's program at the upcoming ALA. So, it'll be about our workplace wellness initiatives.
Congratulations, good. Before we enter into the finance reports and a host of committee reports, I do want to mention that there's a lot of material here. So whatever protocols or Midwestern courtesies we want to have, we certainly can dismiss with them. If anyone wants to get out to refresh their coffee, water, whatever, by all means, take advantage of it because it's going to be a compact meeting. And unfortunately, we're saving the best for last with the presentation of the Story Center. So if Mark will bear with us for that long. So on the finance reports.
Okay, thank you. Page 1 shows the amount of tax revenue we have received by the end of March. The tax revenue received is close to $61 million, which is about 3.7% higher than last year. That's 98% of the budgeted tax revenue. Also, I'd like to mention about the new service we provided to the public, the passport service. Last month, we received a total amount of $14,000. That's over 350 applications. Page 2 shows the operating expenditures for each category. Payroll and benefits, that's over $23 million, 69% of the budget. Library materials, we spent close to $8.3 million, 68% of the budget. All other operational accounts is about $6.1 million, 57% of the budget. At this point, I estimated the year-end surplus could be about $1.5 million. Next page shows the balance for the debt service fund. Right now, we have close to $3.5 million left in the construction fund. We will get all of them dispersed to library by the end of the fiscal year. The balance for debt service is about $58.7 million. Next page is the capital project fund. The report lists all the projects for the fiscal year. At the top, that's the Winnie's Historical Home, the new Story Center. We spent $95,841, but I believe that project has been finished. We may have just a little bit left, but the total project we finished at a $2.7 million, about $300,000 below the total project budget. And the next one is Winnie's collaboration room. There's no number there, but I believe that project also being finished. And I think Jake is getting a breakdown from Jay Dunn's. Once I have the number, I will record them there. That's for Winnie's collaboration room and also for Blue Ridge elevator. That's right in the middle of the report. Both of them have been finished. The third one is the Reading Rocket. We only spent about $9,350 so far this year, and that project has been delayed, and we may need to budget again for the remaining balance for next year. The next one is the self-checkout and the data storage. We have finished the data storage part, which is close to $300,000, and the remaining part will be budgeted again in the future. I already mentioned about Blue Ridge elevator, which has been finished. The last portion of the report is the total amount spent on the capital improvement plan. So far this year, we spent about $16.6 million. Next page is a list of grants and gifts. We have received a total amount of grant funding, about $196,000 this year. And we spent about $178,000. The next page is the health insurance fund. The total amount of contribution from employer and employees is about close to $2.8 million. The fixed costs is about $805,000, and the medical claims is about $1.8 million. Both fixed costs and the claimed expenses together is about 65% of the budget. And we have close to $1.9 billion cash on hand and a $1.6 billion fund reserve. The last page is a summary of the quarterly investment. For operating investment, we have close to $40 million, and the capital improvement, capital investment account is about $27 million. With the rising interest rate, the market value has dropped below the par value, but we will get a par value. And the detailed investment reports has been posted to the board doc. That's my report for the month.
Thank you, Con. We now go to the old business or unfinished business or the committee reports or the building committee, please.
This is Brett Schondemeyer. I will take this if that's okay. So I'm driving out here, and I don't know why the question came to me, what was the gestation period of an elephant? And I think I found out it's like 2 years. And then I thought about Riverside, and I thought, well, it's a big elephant. And so the reason why I say that is that there's been a thoughtful, long consideration of this project, and several earlier versions of it were rejected, and 3 if not 4. And so the purpose of tonight is not to relive that sort of history, but the purpose of this tonight is to finally consummate this project if there's support from the board. And this is a 2-step process. We have a purchase agreement, and then there's lease agreement. There's no point in considering the lease agreement if we don't, approve the purchase agreement. I'm going to ask staff to give a quick summary of the transaction. I know a couple of questions came in from board members over the weekend, and we want to respond to those. But I don't know who wants to do it, or if you trust me to do it.
I trust you to start off.
The concept here, and it's reflected in the agreement, is that the city of Riverside is interested in the corner that we currently have where our library is, because they see the economic development potential of that corner. And then in consideration of purchasing that corner. They're prepared to sell us or provide us a piece of property that's near a park. And I think the plat was sent out and you could sort of see what it is that it looks like. It's a combination of consideration and cash. And both that is sort of reflected in there. And so it's $2 million contribution on the part of the city of Riverside. I think somebody from the city of Riverside is on here. So if I trip on any particular sort of point, the building committee considered this about a week ago. The building committee had considered this probably several different times, but last week we looked at the transaction and there was unanimous support of the agreement. We learned in the course of that is that Jake is not only a construction manager, but Jake has a very, very considerable background in contract management. And so asked staff to send that out. In some senses, you don't realize the skill and talent that's present in the room because it occurs outside of the room. And so that was an important thing for us to do. Our attorney has looked at it. The city's attorney is on the document, somebody from Spencer Fane, and I looked at him and he's a well-regarded, well-ranked attorney who practices in the real estate law. Mr. Rubaugh is here with us. So there's a view or feeling is that the document has been, reviewed at some level of detail from the perspective of we're cooperative parties here. We're interested in a successful outcome. So we're not trying to intentionally trying to take advantage one over the other. They want to make sure that they secure their interest in their property, which would be our property. And then we want to make sure is that we secure our interest in the new property. The president of the board raised an important consideration because this used to be a filling station. I think there's been I don't know how many quick trips there have been in the city of Riverside, but it seems to be kind of an ever moving, ever, floating around. And so this used to be I think it was a quick trip location. And because that there are underground gas tanks and because of the consideration of environmental liability that might be attended to that is that we secured from the city the appropriate paperwork from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So I want to represent to you is that the due diligence has really been done in terms of the transaction. In terms of the transaction, there is the support for undertaking this as we've reflected, or as I have reflected on this. No other city has made this level of contribution to a library project that we have sort of undertaken. So the hope is that the board will support this tonight and it comes to the board by way of recommendation. So I don't believe that it requires a second. I think Gordon had a question and I want to make sure that he has a chance to raise this. And somebody else had a question about the natural gas easement. And while we've addressed that before, I hope that it could be addressed again. So because if you haven't thought about it or if it occurs to you now, it's important to sure that we address that. So you want to address the natural gas easement?
Yeah,
Steve?
yeah, let me start with that one. And so the motion that came from the committee is before you on the screen, approval of recommendation to the building committee full board to execute a purchase and sale agreement of MCPL Riverside Branch with the city of Riverside. And if we go to the next slide, I believe that this is a satellite image. And you can kind of see that the property is, there's like a column that goes right through the middle of it. And that is that natural gas easement that was asked about. So in terms, just orientation, just to make sure people understand the existing Quick Trip, the current Quick Trip is to the left, the parking lot that you see there. This, and then we are just straight across. We kept going straight up the top of the page. You would run into Quick Trip version 1.0 as well as the current Mid-Continent Library. The gas easement, gas line easement that's right there. By our construction, we would be constructing the building to the left of where that easement is. Over the easement and to the right would be where the parking is. You can situate parking over a permanent easement like this. And based on what our architects have told us, there is not only room for the existing building, but a little bit of expansion if that's what we needed to do with this sort of arrangement. So So yes, we've thought very much about the natural gas easement that's there, and we believe that we are building around it in a responsible way.
Any other questions, comments, additions? Yes, sir.
I guess that you mentioned I had questions. I do have a question on the main question, absent a couple, a typo, was whether we've had a real estate attorney who represents us. And I don't know, Phil, you're saying Phil has reviewed this?
Yes.
I reviewed it. That is not where I specialize, my practice.
Okay. So in reference to that, and I'm not either. So my question is, Spencer Fain represents the city. So they cannot represent the library. So is there a reason we didn't engage a real estate attorney to look at this on our behalf?
We typically haven't. I mean, typically we take a look at the contracts, we share them with the board's attorney if he has objection to them, but in the 20 some odd years that I've been involved, that has been the process.
I am not a specialized real estate attorney. However, I have been doing the library's real estate for an awfully long time. If there were something involved here that would have caused me to question something, I would have recommended that it be run by a real estate attorney. This is an unusual transaction because of the property exchange in Boot and the Boot's tied to you constructing a new library. But it is not a very complicated one. And I don't know that there is any reason for the board to have incurred the expense of a real estate attorney for this particular case.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, I just have to say that that I'm delighted that this has come together the way it's come together, because from the way it started out, I wouldn't have given it a chance over the last 5 years. Has it been? Is that longer? Oh, is it longer?
2014.
Time flies. And I won't go, again, I like the others, Brent, I don't want to go through the details of any of all the discussions that we've had and so forth, but there have been many. And the way this has turned out, it strikes me it's really good for us because we're doing what we really think is the best thing for Riverside, and Riverside feels like that's the case. And apparently Riverside also is very grateful to have us cooperating with their general plan for a better downtown and a more successful downtown and better development. And the library site is really a good one for them to produce that part of their planning that they've been working on for a long time. So I just wanted to just say that because we've been working on it so long, and I just think it's an incredible outcome, and I hope we do approve it.
I'd just like to add too that with Jake's expertise, that was a part of this picture too. Him looking over everything that's been done, him spending quite a number of hours in looking over the contracts and everything else. Plus, there's a piece that he put together, kind of like a historical overview. It went back to the September 16th meeting. There was a whole slide presentation on the history of Riverside, and that's well worthwhile looking at it. But it was very detailed. Jake did a great job on that, and just given Jake's level of expertise in the area of looking over those kinds of things, his recommendation was the same as well. So I really appreciate having Jake to fall back on, just because he's so knowledgeable on all these areas, construction, costs, levels of quality, those kinds of things. So he's quite an expert. I'll just add that as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's call the vote. We have the reservation, we have the resolution on the board for the Riverside property acquisition as presented on the screen. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstaining?
I've got a question. I can't tell who said aye. Can we go through the names?
You want to,
Yeah, I can't.
Teresa, why don't you do a roll call
Okay,
since we have so many people online?
okay. Ron,
Aye.
Joycelyn,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Lori, Dummy,
Aye.
Brent,
Aye.
Noel,
Aye.
Rita. Aye. Susan. Michelle.
Aye.
They're all ayes. Maybe we good. Thank you all.
Okay, still within the building committee, we have the Riverside lease agreement for Michael or Brent.
Let me try it. Is that this no point having a lease agreement if you don't have a purchase agreement. So the lease agreement basically covers the considerations involved in us being able to occupy the space that we are until we're able to create to build a new library. There is a 2-year period that begins, I think, when construction begins on our new site. So you can say, well, what happens if we get into it and we want to hit pause, or there's other reasons and considerations. So we trigger that when we start the construction, and the hope would be that, the plan would be that you would be able to complete the building within a 2-year period. The cost of this was $1 for 2 years.
Per year.
At the building committee meeting, I offered to pay the $2, to cover the lease, but that wasn't, you shouldn't vote one way or another based on my contribution to it. But in some ways, it reflects the kind of the favorable relationship that we have with the city of Riverside. So, I mean, the details are in there. It's a much more simpler agreement, but we would be ill-served if we voted for a purchase agreement and then didn't support the lease agreement.
And I'd be happy to add just a little bit on this, is that, this was something that, again, we feel was very favorable. As Brent mentioned, we start the clock. So technically there's a time period before when we start the clock, and we haven't turned over. So, I mean, there could be 6 months in terms of design phase and all of that. And the clock still hasn't started. It's not until we actually start construction that the 2 years starts. And within that time period, there's some boilerplate language in the lease involving, with the city of Riverside being the owners, they have the right to come in and inspect the building. They have to give us 24 hours notice. All felt very doable based on previous experiences that we have with other leases that we have. The other thing, and this is where this is different from, for example, Boardwalk right now, where we had because of supply chain issues and other issues, we ended up with a situation where we had to move out of Boardwalk, but Green Hills isn't open yet. This most likely is not going to happen in this situation. First of all, Jake and J.E. Dunn and SDA have been building buildings within a 1-year period, and we have a 2-year window in order to build it. So I think that that's to our benefit. The other thing is that we don't move out of the building until our new building is ready. That's essentially part of the conditions. So there's not going to be a situation where we're going to have to figure out how do we move back in, because we won't move out until we're ready to move out. This is probably, I feel like this may be the most favorable lease that we've that we've done. No offense to Mr. Ward in Green Valley or to the people I'm running for, but this feels like this is going to be a good one for us. And should mention Mr. Grubaugh did review the lease as well.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had questions on this too. I don't know if they're addressed. My biggest concern was the financial exposure in that 2-year period, because the way the lease reads is we have to maintain the building. I don't know what their intent is, if they're going to demolish it when we're done, when we evacuate or vacate it. But if we're responsible for maintaining the building up until the end of the 2-year period or until the completion of the new one, then there's a financial exposure. And I think that has to be taken into consideration in the budget and the capital plan. So. There was also another clause in there that I thought was rather different. And it says there are additional regulations and policies governing the use of the present premises. That was not in the lease that I saw. And it also said that there could be changes to those, that the city would advise us of those, which again, that would be a lease modification. I don't know, Phil, did you have that discussion with them about that?
I do not.
So I guess that I have a concern if the city passes an ordinance that changes what we have to do. Again, it probably becomes a cost issue, for the most part, but I typically don't see that, or at least I see where it's subject to a written agreement between the parties. And if I could recommend a change, I would recommend recommend that change be made.
I'm getting a note from Jake saying that he has made that recommendation to the city and that they are in agreement to make that change.
Okay, all right.
And Mike, you're on in fact, I see Mike. Did you want to add anything?
He's on mute.
I think he's typing.
Mike,
Mike,
this is Cody. We can hear you typing.
Oh, yes.
We've got your audio now.
You can feel free to just pipe up if you want.
Yeah, I'll jump in if you don't mind on those concerns. Certainly, our primary concern about maintenance is the mowing and those types of things, the day-to-day activities. Our long-term intention is that the building will come down, so I don't.
Works for the city of Riverside.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
I don't think we want to ask you to make any to the building or put. Am I out again?
Oh,
Yeah. You're freezing.
We lost you and you came right back. So
Okay.
I think you were saying that your long-term, you were talking about your long-term use for the building.
Correct. Our long-term use for the property is to demo the building, similar to what we did with the Quick Trip building, and position that ground for redevelopment along with the adjacent ground that the city already owns, which was Quick Trip number 2, as you talk about the various Quick Trips that have been in Riverside. So from that perspective, we're not going to ask you to put new HVAC in or something, like that, make major improvements to deal with some of those water issues that have been there. If you can limp it along for the time that you need to get your building built, then our city engineer is already planning on that building coming down when we take possession of it. As far as the potential for us adopting new ordinances that would impact your operations, the use of cultural, educational type facilities is allowed in every district that we have. We've never made a modification to that. It's mainly to say if there is any kind of ordinance that theoretically could impact you, that we would make sure that you were made aware of those. I can't think of an instance where that occurs. We just wanted to be very transparent in saying that we've had a great communication level with you in the past and intend to continue that through this process and beyond.
If I can, if you are concerned about maintenance and repairs, we could perhaps ask the city to give us a letter that it is their intention that it be demolished when it comes down, and that they are not looking for you to
If that can be made part of the lease, I think that'd be great.
put it in the lease.
I think the other thing, now that I've heard that, is I would recommend putting in an early vacate clause. It says if something happens to the building, not that you're having an earthquake, but we are in a fault line. And if something significant happens to the building that impairs our ability to occupy it, I would like to see a clause that says we can vacate early without any penalty.
Well,
and again, it comes back to a cost issue of
certainly.
they're going to tear down the building anyway, so why would we put money in to keep it open for 6 months?
But I would say ultimately, the liability involved with reaching a lease is the loss of rent. And so if there were a fire, if there were something that rendered the building uninhabitable, and you just decided to move out, then generally speaking, your liability would be, well, it's insured to begin with, so you would have that. But generally speaking, your liability would be
Right.
$2 in rental income.
I thought there was a clause that said we had to operate for the full term.
Well, if it becomes an impossibility, then that's you.
I'm just asking that be in writing, that's all.
I'm more than happy to, if the city will authorize their attorney to discuss it with me, we can work something out.
All right.
Other comments?
We'd certainly, whether you approved it subject to those stipulations or said, let's go back and make sure we've got that one item taken care of or 2 items taken care of, we'd certainly work with you to make that happen.
I'll just defer to Phil to get those addressed.
Well, if the board, we can do it either way. If the board's willing to authorize the lease subject to those modifications, you can go ahead and do it tonight, or we can bring it back on the agenda next month, whichever is the board's wish.
My preference would be to proceed, and
That's what I'm going to do.
and then we can see the modifications when they come back. Understand this is all subject to the approval of their board. They may go back and say, well, we decided not to do this now, So I, for reasons of expediency, not to be, appreciate due diligence, would like to give them an opportunity to approve it. And if they balk at the things that we're asking of them, then we'll become aware of that and we can deal with that at our next meeting. This is a gratuitous aside, but if an earthquake happens, we'll have lots of bigger problems, and the building will have been demolished by itself, and they will have been spared some of the demolition costs. So I'd call the question.
This is Yummy. I wanted to ask a question.
Please.
Okay. Last week at the building committee meeting, my question was, if we leave, if we are out of the temporary building, the leased building in a year, would we still be responsible for the lease? Now, of course, my concern is not the amount of the money. My concern was similar to what Gordon was saying, is the liability. And I believe that Brent's response to me was the lease, as soon as we vacate, the lease ends. So I wonder, is that the case? Or if that is not the case, could that be the case? Simply, whenever we vacate, like our lease will be 2 years or whenever we vacate. That way we would not be liable for the building the entire 2 years.
It has been a while since I've looked at the lease document, and I really can't answer that one off the top of my head. It seems to me like the lease was terminable when you moved into the new building.
Yeah.
But I'm not certain about that without rereading the document.
Yeah, I think this is a simple fix. Yeah. At least based on the city's comments. It's kind of a just, crossing a T and dotting an I.
Okay,
Yeah.
so does that make sense? Could it, wouldn't that
Well,
solve a lot of
that's in essence
problems?
that's in essence one of the modifications is to allow an early vacate, and when we vacate, we're done, and the city takes over.
This is Jake. We actually have it written, whether it's in the lease or in the sales agreement, that 90 days after occupation of the new building, the lease shall terminate. We will be done.
That's what I'm remembering. I just didn't remember if it was in the lease document or it is in discussion.
It's in the
Well, when I talk to council about modifications.
And again, my concern is we don't have any financial exposure. I mean, the rent is a non-issue, so.
I'm still offering my $2.
Okay, any other questions, comments, additions? Okay, legal question or a Robert's Rules of Order question. Since we are including a provision for an addition to this contract, do we have to remove this motion or amend it or help?
You can,
whatever's the easiest.
the easiest way is to have a friendly motion to amend that the approval of the lease would be subject to the revisions discussed.
I'll make that motion.
Second? I'll second. All in favor, say aye, please.
I,
Aye.
I,
Opposed? And abstaining. Okay, it's passed. So we have a resolution to approve the Riverside lease agreement as is on the board, with the understanding that there will be an amendment or an addition to the lease as addressed by the questions during this meeting. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I,
I'm sorry, any opposed?
Aye.
Abstaining. All right, it's passed.
can we call the vote? I can't hear.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, sorry, I can't tell if someone said yes or no. Okay, I'll go through here. Let's see, Ron,
Yes.
Joycelyn,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lori.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Lori.
Okay.
Yummy.
Aye or yes.
Thank you, Yummy. Brent.
Yes.
Noel.
Did you say Noel?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. Rita. Yes. Michelle.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, there's probably a delay or something. Thank you all.
Loud and clear.
Before we go any further, I'd just like maybe take about the promised number in 45 seconds. The way I see this, there's an analogy in probably every family household. If you have a car, you keep putting money into for parts, and next month more parts, next month more parts. Eventually, you realize you're just putting money in finance to some close a sunk cost. I mean, you're not going to get it put the way it should be back by putting more money in it. So I think that's what got here with Riverside. We have a very impolite, the junker car. Now the question comes up, two questions. These are the big ones that, we got the first step of a marathon. Now we got to run the marathon. And two things. What are we going to get a replacement, an Escalade or an Escape? And both wonderful cars, but different functions, different needs. And I think the needs of that are going to be addressed by the area and function that Katina addressed. What's the penetration of a branch in that Riverside area, the dynamics of the population? And again, I think the work is going to be starting now. What do we need and how much can we afford? So, strange analogy, I know, but the first step of a lot of work, because that area is absolutely evolving. So now the fun starts. What do we need and what can we afford? So, okay, still on the unfinished business and the building committee, the capital plan.
Mr. President, unless there's some fervent desire, I think we could probably skip some of these things because these are visual reports and they're in the building docs and you can see them. And I know that there's other significant issues on the agenda.
It's your committee.
And so in consideration of other committees, we just happen to be first. And so we want to provide time for others.
Good job.
So that's your.
That's it for us unless somebody has a burning question they want to ask.
Thank you. Let's go to the Finance and Audit Committee, Gordon.
Okay. Using charge of slides. Just the Finance Committee met on April 7th. We had a rather long session, a couple hours. The bulk of the session was to review some historical data that we'll talk about tonight, sort of briefly. There was an Excel worksheet put together for the purpose of comparing budgets with actual results over the last several years. The board received that via email on Monday. And again, the purpose of that exercise was really to get an understanding, partially for me to get an understanding of the budget, but also to enlighten the board and inform the board on how the budget and the actual numbers compare over time. We discussed during the meeting some of the issues on major expenditures, the debt payments, capital costs, an issue I've raised at the previous meetings, and we'll talk about here is how we fund capital asset reserves or the capital fund as it's known. There was discussion about any new items of interest and consideration that we wanted staff to look into. There were 4 items specifically brought up. One was an internship program targeting high school and college students. That was brought up by John, really to bring people into the library and look at it from the standpoint of the career and to see, give them exposure to the library operations. The second item John brought up was a teachers advisory group. You can correct me, John, if I'm labeling these incorrectly. To engage in discussion about how the library can better support the education initiatives. Both of those had a budget cost that John had put together. Obviously, that requires some staff work and evaluation, and whether those come into play part year, mid-year, full year, that's for the staff to do that work. Am I correct in that?
Right. Yeah, I think we'll have more discussion about those issues at our next finance committee.
The third item that was brought up was what I guess I'll call a fine-free library. Am I correct? I don't know how much of the current budget or I guess previous budgets is fines versus fees. But anyway, fine-free means we eliminate the fines for books and late fees and late, I guess, some lost books as well.
No, just overdue fines.
Overdue fines.
So replacements.
So do we know what that number might be?
It's about 200,000 right now, is it, Ron? For overdue?
250.
Yes, about 200,000.
All right.
Final fees, yeah, the monthly is about 20,000.
About 20,000 a month, so.
Okay, yeah. And then the last item that was brought up was Joycelyn wanted to expand the Forever Books program that I think we learned about last meeting.
Yes, yeah.
So, right. So I didn't intend to go through those in detail. Unless there are some questions. We also talked about the revenue estimate, which Stephen Kahn will go over later. The other item that was on the agenda was the procedures revisions resulting from the ACH fraud. We didn't get that until the meeting, so that has been deferred to a future meeting. So we're not going to talk about that tonight. Okay, we did go over a number of what I guess I'll call historical charts, and Cody, is that correct?
Yeah,
Cody put up the first one, which is the assessed values and levy chart.
Yeah, one more, Cody.
No, keep going. There, right there. Okay. So this is just a history of, again, these were presented to finance. And I've had some discussions since our meeting to try and get a little more information, but give you an idea of what's happened over time in terms of assessed values. You see in 2017, where the new levy, the Prop L levy took effect. The previous levy was 32 cents. Really not a lot of change in the aggregate in terms of the assessed values. You'd almost look at Jackson County as flat for several years there. What I've since learned is happening is that I have the agency here, this label correct, the Missouri State Tax Commission has started to put pressure on the counties to get their valuation aggregate. I'm going to say closer to market value, whatever market value is. I'm a little concerned with market value because you get bubbles and you can have houses go up in price and then they come back down, like happened 15 years ago. So you can see where that started. It looks like it started in 17. 2019 had a fairly significant jump. And again, you'll see that in 2021. So Cody, if you go to the next page, I did this on a county basis. And again, I'm not going to go through each one, but you see the top one is Jackson, the second one is Clay, third one down is Platte, and then the bottom chart is the aggregate. Again, you can see the step ups from 17, 19, and 21. We're not, the county population and the county housing units are growing at about 1% or slightly less. So a lot of those changes are due to valuation, to reassessments on the values. I'm obviously more familiar with Platte. That's been done. I can't tell you the other two counties, what's happening there, but that's what it appears to be happening. So we're seeing the effect of that. Theoretically, if you raise the level of the water in the bathtub, it doesn't impact anybody because the levy would be adjusted. The reality is it's affecting taxes. And again, because you have three counties, not everybody may be doing the same thing in terms of how the assessors are handling it. So one county could be impacted where another one, one county could be seeing increases where another one could be flat. In terms of the revenue dollars, you see where and I have these numbers here in front of me, I think. The revenue increases coming off of Prop L, you can see from 16 to 20, what I'll call the 22, which is really an estimate. Everyone is up about the high 40s, the average in aggregate, it's up about 47% over what 2016 was. So it's a combination of new construction, some assessment value changes, and the levy increase over that time period. There are some specifics on the levy we talked about last time. I'm going to skip that just for the sake of time. But the one piece, there's mechanics to the levy rate that Quan has. It's a state formula. He's projecting that the levy will stay flat for the 22 year, mainly because this is a non-assessment year. So you don't expect much change or much growth going on. 23 could look totally different. The other thing from the document that Steve forwarded to me, I'd asked a question last meeting about what happens when you choose a levy as opposed to letting the formula do it. And based on what I read, it's not a permanent lock. It's a 2-year lock. So I could be wrong, but that's the way I read it. Is that right, Quan?
Yes, after 2 years, you can recalculate.
Right. Yeah. Right. So if the board opted at some point to say we're we're going to pick the number as opposed to following the formula that the state provides, then it would lock you in for 2 years under that levy rate. Okay, now we can go back to, there you go. Thank you. All right, this is just the print page of the Excel file that I put together. You all have this at your leisure when you want to look at the numbers. I'll give you the quick rundown on there. There are 2 tabs on the worksheet. One has the data. The other tab is this presentation here. The 2 boxes at the top you see that are orange and blue, those are drop-down menus. One for the chart on the left, one for the chart on the right. The values in that table on the upper left change based on what you select. The percentages also change based on what you select. The 2 charts at the bottom showing the population and the housing units, those are static. I have adjusted those based on what Steve and Quan have given me, which is 67% of Jackson County and 94% of Clay County being within the district. So I think we went over the finance committee. I wasn't aware of that or didn't have those percentages. So that's been the only change. I added a few other lines in there since the finance committee meeting, but other than that, the file is largely the same. So the purpose again of that was to show how things are budgeted relative to what happens on an actual basis, to see where there's spread. It's, you know, there's more than one way to skin the cat in doing the budget. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So one of the issues one of the questions that I've raised in this process was how we fund the capital reserves. And historically, what I'll call the capital asset buildings, which is the buildings and the property. And historically, that has been done with the excess from operations. The alternative approach is to fund that on the front end out of revenues and build that based on what's called a reserve plan, which is an estimate of what your capital needs are over a time period. Ideally, you would take this out on every piece of property you have, every major component, and spread it over the life of those assets, which I'm going to guess on a building is probably 30 years. So you're going to come up with some calculation that says your capital commitment over time is going to be X dollars. Obviously, year to year that changes based on what's happening, what you've done, etc. But we have over 600,000. Right, Quan, over 600,000 was square feet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Over 600,000 square feet of physical space. 675,000. So, that's a significant commitment over time to maintain those assets. So you do that in conjunction with the operating budget, setting aside the money. I guess coming back to the alternatives of, do you wait until the end of the year to find out what you have available because you didn't spend it, or do you plan that as part of the budgeting process to say we're going to set aside those funds on the very front end of the year, and then our operating budget is synced up probably a little tighter than what it historically has been. And those are kind of a couple questions I'd like to get some feedback for the finance committee and how it approaches its next 30 days of evaluating the budget that's going to be presented. So, I guess my question is, should we be funding or how do you want to approach this? Do you want to continue what we've been doing, which is again funding from excess out of operations? Or do we want to take some sort of a number and it would be a calculation of some sort? There's more than one way to do that. Things like as simple as I'm going to pick a number. Second is a percent of revenues. You could do some number on a per square foot basis and set that aside. But I say that just to get things kicked off. Okay. Again, the intent would be over time you build a reserve plan and you actually fine tune that over the course of a few years, and then you got pretty solid numbers you can work with on a forward basis. So I put that up for discussion. In terms of the budget, I think there are going to be some issues to deal with. One of those is inflation. I've seen inflation impact a number of things in terms of the people I work with. If you look at the markets are really taking into account inflation. I don't know what that's going to do to us, but it's probably going to be an issue over the next 12 months. So that is a fast way through this. So I'd like, John, you've been on the finance committee for a long time. I appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, well, Gordon and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit before the meeting, and I guess I feel pretty good about the way we've been doing it, which is the way of budgeting and trying to get the budget as close as we can to what our actual needs are going to be. But we don't really know, as you pointed out a couple of times, we don't really know right now what we're going to be spending for modifications, for maintenance on the new properties. We are working on that. My understanding was that staff is working on to polish that down. We have an estimate now, but the estimate is just that. It's a kind of a rough estimate, and I think you pointed that out, Gordon.
Yeah.
That it was, and so I'd feel better if we were going to budget an amount. I'd rather try to budget an amount that we know more about. Otherwise, I think it gives us a lot of flexibility if we sort of wait and see what's going to happen, and do what we've done in the past, which is to let that amount that we leave some slack in the budget, which is always a good thing to do, particularly when you're expecting inflation, expecting other things that you don't really know what are going to happen. Leave enough slack so that you can have something to use toward the end of the budget period that's not a fixed piece, but something that relates to what's actually happened during that period of time. So I feel pretty good about that. But you make another point, a good point, and I think that it deserves a lot of discussion in the committee, and I hope we'll have that.
And again, just because we had this discussion, you don't have to have a hard number. I think my concern is that within the capital plan, you have really what I'll call maybe two major components. You have the construction costs that you have on your list there that have to get done, how much is set aside for that, and then how much do you have otherwise dedicated to specific projects over the next few years. My concern is waiting 12 months to figure out what that number is, and then hoping we have something left over. My preference is to set that money aside on the front end.
I like the idea of engaging the input from Jake or somebody that actually works and is very familiar with the structural, the components of the buildings, to determine what are the life of the various elements of the buildings, carpeting, even landscaping, and have reasonable anticipations and estimates of what the cost is going to be. And once we have that, establish actual reserve, because then we got a dollar amount that somebody like Jake, as Michael mentioned, has absolute sterling credentials. So we know this is what is going to be we're facing down the road. Of course, subject to inflation and other factors. And then when the times arise that we'll have these needs for expenses, we have the cash there. I think there's a structure that would be helpful for basic management. And there's an analogy, a very loose one, but in defined benefit plans, the actuaries determine how much you're going to need down the road for somebody who's going to be retiring in 5 years, 10 years, whatever the population of the employee base is, and start funding now. Not that you're going to make the pension payment right now, but you're going to be making it later on when it comes later on, it's going to be a monster size amount. So anticipate that with as much reasonable accuracy as you can and put the money for that, because you know the expense is going to be there. So I guess we're adding something else. If we go that way, we're going to be putting something else on Jake's plate.
Yeah, as I understand it, is that the staff is, with Jake leading it, is actually working on that very thing that you mentioned, is to hone that down to a more real number. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the estimates that we do.
Okay,
but you know, you're talking about a next step up, and I think that's good.
Yeah, John, absolutely. Jake's going to come up with the number, and they would say, okay, we know we have to spend that number for new sodding at half dozen sites. But once we know that number, let's start saving up for it. So when the time comes that we have a fortune for landscaping, it's not going to clobber us from that year's budget.
I'm just pleased
it's saving her a rainy day.
Yeah. I'm pleased you include landscaping as these.
That's right. I'm like that about the roof. Any other comments?
We've heard this several times, and I think the building committee, when it gets together next, and we work on our portion of the budget, can come back and take a look at it and you know, offer either perspectives on what we think the amount might be. And then there's two questions: what are the dollar amounts over time? And then the question is, what's the funding strategy?
Right.
Because I think these are the two that you've challenged us to do, and I'm up to a challenge.
Yeah, and we know generally that we're going to have to spend some money on maintaining.
Right.
Even though we've got a lot of new facilities, and we have a general idea of what that's going to cost. And so the way we've been doing it is that we know that there's going to end up being slack in the budget. And every year that I've been involved, that's turned out to be enough to fund the capital improvement thing. That doesn't mean it's going to happen every year. And I think the more refined we can get our numbers, the better. So I think it's worth, discussing that part of it.
And that's sort of the issue on refining the budget is to, in my view, if you have an operating surplus, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm when you start putting cushion into multiple line items, it gets hard to find out where, you don't see that until you sit down and do a chart like that and say, okay, where are we putting it? Let's pull that out and let's acknowledge that there's a surplus there and let's just set it aside. And that's really all I'm saying. I'm not, I think that the closer you budget, the easier it is to manage. And then you're not sitting there saying, well, what didn't I do that I planned on, or what the staff planned on that didn't get done?
Yeah.
So, and especially if get into fixed expenses, those things are fairly easy to target. So, any other comments, questions? Okay. The last chart I had is Jake, is a projection chart. Keep going, maybe the other direction. I don't know. Oh, right there. Okay. So this is a fairly simple chart. I had, from my term on the board the first time, I had the 2017 projection. There are two vertical bars there. One is the blue, which is the 2017. The sort of yellowish brown is the current 2022. Those are both done in the Q1. The 2017 was obviously after the Prop L was completed. And then you'll see the other lines I put in there are the population, which is the pink lines. Those are actual numbers, again, for the first few years, and then projected using just the average that has been over the past 10 years. I think I noted at the Finance Committee meeting, I've worked with some stuff at Platte County. Platte County has grown 1% a year for the last 30 years. It's pretty consistent. And then the green line at the bottom is the housing units. Both of those tend to track each other. The data I used came off Mark. Again, it was adjusted for the percentages we talked about earlier. That blue line is the registered borrowers I took out of the audit report. So I think the point I'm just putting up here to illustrate is that, again, going back to some of the charts we talked about earlier, where you have increased values in properties, increased values of assets, and the impact of those over time, you're seeing a trend change in terms of what the revenue projection is. And so I'm not suggesting we change anything this year. It's kind of a question, be a question for the board as to what that trend should be on a long-term basis. And again, the projection model that's here is pretty simple. It's just looking at some the large buckets and applying percentages to those over the course of a 20-year period. So it's fairly basic math, but that's what it's showing. And so again, I put this up here for the board to just be aware of in terms of the revenue. Again, going back to the issues of the housing and prices, and at some points that's going to decline. So that's the purpose of that. Any questions on that?
So at some point you said it's going to decline. What are you referring to when you said that?
Well, if you go back to 2000, if you look at go back, and I just saw something late this afternoon in terms of average housing prices. If you go back to the early part of this century, you were seeing housing prices move away from the mean. And so, the prices went up in 5, 6, and 7, and then they reverted back to the mean in terms of cost.
And what would the mean be?
On a trend basis,
What is the mean? What do
you mean at the dollar amount?
I get you're using.
Well,
I just need to know what you mean by that.
It's the average over time of a trend line cost
of a house.
Yes. Okay. So if you go back, if you've said if the average house price in 2000 was 150,000, and you looked at what that same house was happening over the next 5, 7, 8 years, that $150,000 house was being sold at 250 maybe, because people thought real estate never went down. And so after 2008, then you had the implosion, those real estate values reverted back to the mean and the trend line. And so you run the risk again of the same thing where you've had extremely and artificially low interest rates that the buyers were looking at a payment as opposed to the value of the house. So rates 2 years ago or a year and a half ago were down in the mid 2s, and now they're close to 5. That changes the price.
So this is Brent Shelton. I did not raise this at the finance committee, but this is our housing units. What about apartments? These are people who live in apartments. A significant number, some of our communities where half, if not more, than the people live in apartments. So I'm looking at analysis, and I don't know that it takes into account the full tax base and how that might change any of this analysis.
I don't know how they calculate housing units. I'm assuming that's an apartment is a housing unit.
Well, I'm not prepared to assume that.
Well, from the article I read this afternoon, which talked about that is at least the calculations in it. And again, I would have to go back to Mark and ask the question. And Steve,
That's a great question, because in the overall, would you drive around Platte County? You live in Parkville, there's that whole off of 435 explosion of apartment buildings. Up around Platte City, same thing. So those things are, they're exploding everywhere across the city, thousands of them. And so it's an interesting question. How do you include that in all of the tax equations?
It may be in there and it may not be in there.
I don't know why. I mean, this isn't housing. What they call a housing unit is a living unit. So I think it would include apartments, condos, however that's done. One building is not a housing unit in the same fashion as a house.
I wasn't looking at that. I'm just saying the explosion of everything.
No, I agree. So. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Steve, Kwon, revenues?
Yeah, we can talk about revenues, or the revenue projection. So Cody, if you go back to the first slide, that one. That is the slide that Quan and I put together involving our revenue projections. And I want to get that in front of me. Here we go. So what you're seeing here, and certainly you can see some of these impacts that Gordon was talking about in terms of the levy rate, assessed valuation, and all of that. You can really see that if you go all the way to the very bottom, look at total taxes. You look at our estimate for 21-22 is about $62.2 million. Our estimate for the coming budget year is $62.6 million. So only about a $400,000 increase in overall revenue, which is making things really, really challenging because this particular year, we're going to be recommissioning many buildings. We are dealing with inflation of all sorts. And so it's going to be particularly challenging for us. But if we back up to the top of this, it really does kind of walk you through how we go about doing this. Basically, what ends up happening is Quan starts getting the assessed valuations from the counties and projected assessed valuations and starts looking at what that amount is going to be relative to our tax levy or our projected tax levy amount. Right now, because of several factors, we are not expecting our tax levy to, we're expecting it to hold. We're expecting it to stay about where it is right now for the coming year. When you look at the property tax, again, assessment and assessed valuation, inflationary circuit breakers and all of that, we're looking at about $18.7 million for Clay County, $32.7 million for Jackson County, and $11 million for Platte County. So relatively flat, pretty flat for most of our counties. We then take out the what's called the property tax transfer. That's our certificate of participation bond payment. And so we take that off, and then and that gives us a property tax amount of $56 million, roughly. That's only a 0.7% increase over last year. Then we look at other potential revenue sources, which you can all see those right there, add those all together, and that's where we come up with $57.4 million in our total revenues for expenditures. And then, of course, when you take out the payment, that's the difference between the 57 that you're seeing there and the 62.6. If you look at the three bar charts, which the 3-year trend, you can see 2021 is just above 60 million, a little bit above 60 million for our estimate for 21-22, and then our budgeted amount is pretty close to the same for the following year. So these are the numbers that we've been working on in terms of our benchmarks for draft budgeting and what we've been working towards. Juan, what would you like to add? Because I'm sure I've missed some detail.
Oh, no, you didn't miss anything. I can just add some additional information. Expanding the tax revenue. We all say in the next year the levy will stay the same, but there could be 3 variables affecting the tax revenue. One is new construction, which we will get the new construction as a new revenue to the library. And the second one is personal property tax. Usually personal property tax, we may see a tiny increase. The third one is delinquent tax. I think it will be smaller than current year's delinquent tax. So add all up, we're projecting a 0.7% increase. Yeah, that's my additional information.
Thank you, Quan. So this is what staff's been working toward, and certainly be happy to answer any questions about the projections and impact that would have on staff's draft budget.
John, just one question about that. And I can't recall how this is handled, and I know you have probably done this, but there, as we know, local governments are pretty good at waiving taxes to get development. And there are lots of laws in the state that allow them to do that. certain percentages that they might want to waive in order to attract the developer. And have we estimated what that will be? I mean, some of that's known and some of it's unknown.
Yeah, the new construction is after those TIFs.
Yeah.
Probably around 2% of the total assessment.
So that's what you put in. It's about 1 to 2% will be waived by the.
No, we will receive that as new construction after TIFs.
Okay.
Subtracting all the TIFs.
Oh, after the TIFs.
Yes.
But during the year, we will lose the revenue.
The 2% subtracting all those exemptions.
All right, and then what about payments in lieu of taxes?
That's hard to project because it varies so much year-over-year.
Yeah, so, but we've struggled to try to get ourselves in a position where we can negotiate for payments in lieu of taxes where it's warranted. And so that is a revenue that, is there, but we really can't count on it because there's no way to estimate it right
Is it
now.
material? Yeah. I mean, what dollar amount are you talking about?
Don't know.
If you look at the annual comprehensive financial report, the footnote talk about all the tax abatements. Based on, it's not 100% correct based on the information we can get from each county. It's about, I believe it's around $3 million a year. But a number could be.
That we receive from that?
No,
Abated.
It's diverted.
Wait, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is, as Quan was saying, that isn't in the comprehensive annual report. It is hard to, sometimes it's hard to capture the full abatements where they take it completely off the tax rolls, as opposed to a TIF, which they actually pay the taxes, then it gets diverted away. Those are easier for us to see and easier for them to report, so.
But hopefully, during the course of the year, there will be some abatements that we think are partially justified, but we feel that the library should be partially compensated also by payments in lieu of taxes, and hopefully we'll negotiate that way as the year goes along, and that there will be some payments in lieu of taxes that will be made as a result of our efforts. And that has happened in the past. And I don't know that you could probably do a chart and show how many abatements there were and how many payments in lieu of taxes were received as a part of those abatements to reduce those abatements insofar as our revenue is concerned. A lot of times the schools are the ones that really go after that. And we try to work with the schools, to gain as much as we think is necessary and fair to allow the abatements to go forward, but yet to compensate us for the loss of revenue.
So I have.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Gordon. Personnel Committee, Joycelyn?
This abatement actually has to be required.
Yes, this is Joycelyn. I'm also on the road. But the Personnel Committee met and went over the preliminary budget for the personnel aspects of the entire budget. And as is tradition, the personnel portion of the budget usually hovers around 60% of the budget. Those are our historical numbers and our practical numbers. And so handling that first helps staff to be able to focus on the remaining 40% of that. Given that the committee unanimously voted to bring forth the personnel items on the budget after a lengthy, in-depth, very well presented personnel budget discussion, lots of discussion around that. Since I am on the road and since really we felt pretty confident about the budget. I feel perfectly confident in handing it over to staff at this point to go over that.
Thank you, Joycelyn. And she did tell me that rather than reporting from the bus, that she was going to ask me and Jennifer to tag team on this. I do want to let you know that Jennifer, our HR director, did a fabulous job, and I think all of you who were here at the HR meeting and listening to the personnel budget can attest to that. We took it upon one of the recommendations that our president has given us, which is for staff to do a little bit more deeper dive of history and why we do what we do and how we come up with some of the numbers that we do, particularly because we have so many newer members of the board. So we're not going to do that tonight. The feeling was we did that in the personnel committee meeting, and certainly we're happy to go into any of that level of detail that anybody would like to hear. But what I would like to do is just sort of give you some of the highlights of the preliminary personnel budget. The motion that did come out of the committee was approval of the recommendation of the personnel committee to the full board for adoption of the personnel components of the proposed budget for 22-23. And that did come in the form of a motion from the committee and was unanimously passed by the committee. And again, this is just an initial step. It just kind of helps the staff understand direction so that we can work on other parts of the budget. So there's time to change each and every line that we're going to talk about tonight, if that is the pleasure of the board. So if we go to the next slide is the detailed budget. This is also in board docs. Just to go through this, and I am going to try to go through this pretty quickly. What we do is we actually start this proposal and we look at a number of active benefits eligible employees, how many we have on the payroll on a given day. And then we will reduce that amount by essentially our turnover ratio, so that we kind of realize that there's going to be a good number of time where we will not be fully employed, we'll be saving that money, and what impact does that have? So we discount by that amount. Then what we also do is we count up the number of authorized positions that are currently open, authorized with no incumbent. As I've been telling you for the last several months, it's been really challenging in terms of having people stay, having people not resign, and building that number back up. So this number is one of the highest that I seem to remember it being at 32.5, and constantly working to try to get that filled. And so then when we get all that gets us our total benefits eligible amount. And then any additional proposed FTEs. In this case, staff was recommending 3 additional proposed FTE positions. 2 of those are going to Green Hills, to the new unit of service in Green Hills. And then the other one is for IT, helping us to support all the different IT efforts that we've got. So that would end up bringing our total authorized positions to 21.5. So that gives us our number of benefits eligible employees. Then the next thing the next 2 lines that we've got talk about the performance adjustment, or I'm sorry, the market adjustment and performance adjustment. So we've allocated 1.9% of a pool to help make market adjustments for any number of different reasons. Inflation, the salary study that we're doing that's going to help us determine where we are in terms of market adjustments. So we have a small pool, 1.9%, to apply there. And then we have another pool for the performance pay. This is something we talk about from time to time, where we allocate the money, we do the pay for performance, and then we have this pool of money, the what turns out to be $233,000, to pay for performance for individual employees. So the total adjustments end up being $587,000. Total salaries for our benefits eligible staff is $20 million. And so that's one set of staff. And the next set of staff that we have are part-time, are essentially straight hourly employees, the ones that we pay by the hour, no benefits. And so we have some part-time branch staff wages and part-time headquarters wages. The headquarters wages you see has went down considerably in that amount because a lot of that is just tightening, that we didn't need nearly as many of the numbers that we needed to make that work. So our total hourly proposal is about $5.5 million. Now that is a 6% increase, I'm sorry, 4.6% increase, which is considerable. But one of the things that's really driving that is the new Missouri minimum wage. And so we're trying to keep in front of that. And in doing that, we're seeing that increase in that hourly rate. So then when you add up the benefits eligible as well as the straight hourly, that gives us $25.5 million, or a 3.8% increase in overall salaries. The next set of lines essentially are the Social Security, unemployment, various insurance. And so when you and most of those are just a matter of calculating percentages based on the hours. And so, once we get to that, we are actually seeing a pretty decent increase there. And it's mostly around the medical insurance funding. And we can talk a little bit about that in a second, and how we're planning to manage that a little bit. But we are seeing a 10% increase, and some of that's having to do with our medical insurance. So then we have two more ancillary benefits. They're a long-term disability and life insurance benefit for employees. And then we get down to our employee, our human resource management, employee assistance, and all other final benefits. So within this, we have things like the employee assistance program, which was invaluable and has been invaluable for a number of different years, not just helping with work-life balance, but also mandatory referrals for folks, all kinds of different benefits. It's been a very, very good benefit for our employees. We also have on here our background checks, which is increasing because we're doing more hiring, also doing more in-person programming where we do background checks on many of our program presenters. And so that number, we're seeing an increase there. Our mandatory compliance training, that's things like, making sure that our staff understand discriminatory practices and not practicing them in the workplace, things. But what I tend to refer to as affirmative defense training, so that when you do have a wrongful termination, and usually the second question they ask you is, did your employees have a reasonable expectation of realizing what they did was wrong? We can say yes, because we've done the training every year. As well as all kinds of advertising, employee recognition program, the ADAAA and workplace safety and accommodation. These are opportunities for us to help people make changes in their workplaces so that we don't wind up with carpal tunnel issues, things like that, or other sorts of discriminatory issues. So you get all the way down to the bottom. Bottom number is $3,400,000, $3.4 million, up 3% from the year before. But if you remember from the last report where we were talking about revenues, our revenue projections, 57.3, this number comes in at 60.03, or $17,000 above the 60% target that we shoot for in terms of our personnel budget. And so with that said, like I said, we went into great detail in the personnel committee meeting, going into each line, how each line is calculated, how it's used. I think it was a very productive meeting. But this was the proposal that was passed by the personnel committee. Jennifer, is there anything at this point you would like to add?
It's 34.4 million and not 3.4 million.
What I said?
You said 3.4 million. I'm like,
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to feel.
I'm getting a lot of trouble. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Nothing else?
Unless are there questions to answer?
Okay, yeah. So, Ron, let's do that. Yeah.
Questions, comments? Jennifer's here. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'll ask a couple, one is obvious, but do what is our average FTE during, if you did those month to month, is it fairly flat?
Like this count, like the active count?
Well, no, when I say FTE, so if you added your full-time and your part-time, and you did put on a calculation, how many people?
Yeah, it actually, I mean.
Is it fairly stable?
It's difficult to speak to stability post-COVID. So, I mean, it was a certain level pre-COVID.
Right.
And then as we've moved through COVID, that's been difficult to predict. So it's come down quite a bit, in the middle there, and now it's back up. But yes, generally we don't see big swings.
But do we have?
Total entities.
I'm just asking, do we have that data?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's, again, just from a finance standpoint, understanding the cost.
If I was going to estimate it right now, if I'm thinking this is just off the top of my head, it hovers between 530 and 560.
Okay. All right. The part-time, you mentioned there's a 4 what is the average hourly rate of part-time that was in place in 21? I know I have 21 data, but what was the average rate in 21? What are you budgeting for this fiscal year for your average hourly person?
So they're in two different categories. One would be library pages, and they all make the same rate of pay. And that's how it's been historically. And they're really tight with minimum wage. And so the rate of pay that those hours, that we will spend on those hours will be $12 an hour this upcoming year, because that's the 1/1/2023 Missouri minimum wage. The other group of part-time.
$12 coming off of what rate?
$12 coming off of, you mean, so like I would guess if I go back and look, it's like 40,000 hours or something like that.
No. You had $12 an hour is what the new rate is. What is the existing rate?
$11.50.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think that $11.50 is currently above what
marginally above
what the Missouri minimum wage is at. I want to say it's at $11.15 or something like that.
Right.
And then, but we'll be right there for one. And then the second group are our frontline part-time staff. And right now they're, for all frontline staff, the average hourly rate is about $60 an hour. I don't know separate for part-time, but I know that for full-time staff, it's like 17 and some change an hour for full-time branch staff, not managers or anything like that.
Right, but that's your part-time rate as well then?
It depends on how long the person has been here. They're on the pages are the only one that are every person makes the same.
Right.
The rest are on.
I'm just trying to gauge, have you, in terms of your 5.2 to 5.5, how much of that is hours increase versus how much of that is just pure rate increase?
It's coming from two different things. So the increase can primarily be attributed to, because as you can see, the amount of pay increase that is not even close to what market's doing, the amount that we have available to do that. So it's not a heavy amount of that attributed to pay increases, but it is attributed to the increase in service and locations. So we're going to be moving into a time here where we have more locations open. We had locations closed as we've been through the capital plan. And so we need to make sure that we've got the staff to staff all the locations that will be open in this upcoming year. So
let me sure. Do you have enough in here for from the rate standpoint? Because you were talking about turnover, unable to, so do you have an adequate pay scale in here to hire the people you need on a part-time basis without benefits?
That's a hard
critical issue.
That's a hard question because it's again, I've been doing HR since the 90s. So in the late 90s, when I was hiring for frontline retail staff, it was really difficult then. And this is way harder now. It's a whole other ball of wax. So it's difficult to predict. We are right in the middle of literally this week getting our first market rates for a compensation analysis, a market compensation analysis. Mm-hmm. So we want to use that data since the last one we did was in 2016. Is this amount sufficient to make a huge, we're not going to get to Hobby Lobby $18 an hour. We're not going to, there's no way for us to make that kind of jump And I wouldn't recommend making that kind of jump because I feel like that would be an overcorrection. But the way we will do it will be tied to the data that we get from this market compensation.
Okay, all right. And there's some good news about some of the preliminary that we're getting. You were telling us that we're looking like we're in the 90s compa ratio.
Yeah. So
in a big picture.
Yeah. So
above, a little bit above. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 25 benchmark positions that we've used before, based on the average pay for the folks, the incumbent folks in those positions, versus the 50 percentile in the market, those market rates, we're at about a 94.4, which is, yeah, we're in a really good place overall. So there's places that need to be more work and places that really don't need any work at all.
So the other question I had was on the third line in, which is the authorized but no incumbent. So are those positions that are normally, because I see you had a budget last year, 1.5, the number here is a little bit less, but are those positions, are they filled, or is that just normal flow of vacant positions because that's how the business operates?
It's the second thing.
Or the latter.
Yeah, it's,
okay,
I mean, I would say probably 28 of those positions are in some point of the hiring process right now. The difference between last year and this year is we did have, and that's one thing, we did have 43 point something positions unfilled at this time last year.
But that was coming,
because we had been in.
that was coming off a hiring freeze.
Yeah, because we had been in a partial hiring freeze because of COVID. And so we did have more unfilled positions at this time last year. Also, I'm running that estimate quite a bit tighter than previously. So it's not based on an average salary. It's based on what the projected salaries would be for those specific 32.5 positions that were currently unfilled at the time that this.
Okay. Well, again, I'm just trying to understand, because that equates to about 42,000 per person there. So if they're unfilled, I mean, are you expecting those to be filled?
Yeah.
On July 1?
Yeah, well, they should be, yeah. I mean, we're at this stage, there'll be other ones that are not filled. So that's where, previously there was, for lack of a better word, it was into the current salaries line at the very top. We were taking a percentage reduction for turnover. So taking the report and then reducing it by a couple percent. Instead of doing that this year, I'm running it tighter. Actual data for how many positions that we expect to be vacated throughout the year, how long we expect them to be vacated, and the average salary during that time. So that 700 some odd thousand reduction that came off of that is like on line 2. It's going to account for those periods of time when those positions are not filled.
So
Exciting.
okay, so your comparable number is really 1.5 against less than 700,000. Is that fair?
Remember, we ate a lot of Taco John's.
I think it would be like the.
Oh, did you?
You're taking out you're taking out 725. So,
I'm sorry. Somebody's not on mute.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, if you took those top 3 lines from this year and the top 2 from last year, we should be getting as far as comparable. And that was just a choice I made in order to show that turnover separately so that we could show that we're actually making a calculation, not just an estimate.
But I just want to take a second and say thank you. I mean, because honestly, what we are doing right now was what you encouraged us to do your first term on the board, was run this a lot tighter and figure out exactly what our turnover is and make the right adjustments. And so thank you for making us better.
Questions, comments? I have a general comment. I had a chance to attend the personnel committee, and it was very informative. I absolutely appreciate having you quantifying the different elements of what goes into the budget. But you mentioned too, there's going to be this study that's coming out like late summer, early fall, I think.
Yeah, we should be getting the results of it, and it's a process to work through the data and how we're going to apply it. So the adjustment to market that we put in the budget likely won't be applied until around September, because we want to make sure that we've got, that we're applying it according to what we're finding out in the market, and we're not overdoing it on one end, underdoing it on another end.
Sure. And the 50 points, I think you mentioned for references, or 50 institutions or areas, are those other libraries or within the, basically the service area of the Mid-Continent?
As far as where we get data from,
Mhm.
it'll be more than that. I mean, we're using Lockton because of the reach of how much data they have.
Mhm.
So we will have national data that will be comparing libraries to libraries for library positions. But in other, for our positions that are not library positions, that are support positions, they'll be compared to other industries, and then it will be indexed for this. It'll be regionally indexed. So about 97 to 97.5% of what we find out nationally. And yes, they don't just use one compensation study. It'll be several plus some compensation information that I provided to them from some regional libraries like Daniel Boone Regional and Tulsa City County and some places that did their own studies in the last couple of years. So I am comfortable with the comprehensive data that we have access to.
And it's not San Francisco, New York.
No, it takes those things into consideration and then indexes it for here. There's an indexing done for Midwest.
And then the performance adjustments, are those based on employee ratings or reviews? So it's individual?
It is individual. And so that season is now. So in May and June, our managers, our leaders will be evaluating their staff and giving them a score. And we will base, the distribution of that amount on those performance evaluation scores.
Yeah, and let me just preface this with, I know it's an unfair question, but before coming here, I picked up the necessities, gas and jewel pods at the Quick Trip. And I noticed that right in front of the door, it was help wanted part-time, $19.50. Is that something that is going to be an absolute awful impact on attracting as well as retaining folks?
I will say this, and that's why I said something about not overcorrecting. There are reasons why people work for the library and not for Quick Trip and not for Walmart, that are not tangible. So that we don't have to make up that whole ground. Now, are we competing with them for frontline staff? Absolutely.
Right.
And so we have to balance that. And we've shifted. If you look, we're at about 760 head now.
Yeah.
When I started in some HR role in 2004, we had 1,060 heads. And over time, what we've done is tried to shift to benefits eligible full-time staff members. They stay longer and they become more excellent at their work. And we are able to provide them with benefits that, like I said, they can't put them in their gas tank, but it's hard to not recognize that we provide a defined benefit pension plan, that we provide a good health plan, those types of things that are meant to help folks. That I would line up against any other organizations.
And actually, Jennifer and I talked about this a little bit because right before she came to work with the HR group, I think I did some paycheck runs in the summer that year of about 1,100 people. And so we definitely decreased, less head, better compensated, better supported, better invested in.
That's it.
Which I think is something that is what we are doing. But the other thing I think about is that the other economic downturns that we've had are inflationary upticks that we've had. We always lag. And so this first 6-month period is always hard for the library. And we always lose some good people.
Yeah.
But over time, because we lag about a year, we tend to make it up on the back end.
And it is a challenge.
No doubt.
And it's always a balancing challenge. Because we like to move FTEs where they go, attrit FTEs from one area and move into another area so that they're being focused on what the library is doing today, not what the library was doing 10 years ago. And also so that if there's less work needed to be done in this area, that we're moving that expenditure to a different area, and we're not laying people off or anything like that. We're attriting and reassigning, and that's work that's taking place all the time. So we want to make sure that we're not stuck in any ruts or anything like that. So.
Good, thank you. Questions, comments further?
Cody's moving back to the motion, and the one thing, probably the one other thing that I'll mention is that the personnel committee is looking at
the reserve fund for the insurance. Right now, we are actually overfunded by policy. And so the personnel committee was looking at using some of that fund to help smooth rates. But I think I'm not sure that the data that we have on the screen is actually accurate, but that's what we're actually looking to help to ensure that our premiums remain the same this year. We're actually going to use the reserve fund a little bit to get back under.
The data on the personnel budget that we were just looking at, that number is correct.
That number's right.
The calculation page, there is an updated version that speaks to that number if we need to provide that.
And I think we will send that out to the board so that you can see that updated reserve fund. But we are overfunded. I think some of the overfunding has to do with, people, postponing medical, things like that through COVID. And so we're just overfunded a little bit right now.
So we have a motion on the floor. It's from a committee, so favor. Any more discussion?
Yeah. So is this just something taken into consideration in the budget, or is this a formal motion to approve a I don't remember.
As I see it, it's a recommendation from the committee.
So is there any motion? Is there any vote needed?
It just helps to create the direction for the staff. Everything there's no form of the final approval of the budget is not going to come till June. So every line is still up for debate. But what this does is this helps the staff know the general direction of the board on 60% of the budget so we can work on the other 40.
I remember this not being a motion item or a voting item.
It typically isn't. It typically has been a voting item. It just kind of helps us.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then the finance committee will pick at it appropriately.
Starting in May and June. Yeah.
So we have the motion on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. I'm sorry, this is Lori. I didn't get to hear the whole motion. Can you repeat the motion?
Yeah, let me read it to you again real quick, Lori. Approval of the recommendation for the Personnel Committee to the full board. The adoption of the personnel components of the proposed 22-23 budget.
Okay, yeah, I approve.
Any opposed? Abstaining?
I'm going to abstain.
One abstention carries. Technology committee is Lori's here.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here. We met yesterday and it was a very good meeting. And I think, is Brian going to share some of what we spoke about, Steve?
We can do that if you'd like us to. Do you want us to do that, Lori?
Yes, please.
Okay. Brian, can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, while Jennifer did a great job presenting on the personnel committee, I bored everybody to tears with an infrastructure review. We did have a good meeting. We focused on some of the tech that we had done the past year to kind of make technology more flexible for the customers. So we talked about our hotspots, which we call Wi-Fi to go. We have 515 of those that we check out. Those are go on all the time. So that's for people to take internet home, use it on the road, in their house, in their apartment, whatever. We have 515 of those now that people check out. That service has been going very well. That's all been grant funded up to this point. We are starting to have to pay for that now here in March. The other technology to go service that we talked about was our Chromebooks to go. So those are just laptops that people can check out and take home with them. We have 175 of those that we check out to folks. And that's going pretty well also. And that's been all grant funded also. So those are all, that doesn't carry any ongoing costs. They're just paid for and we're done with them other than just kind of taking care of them. But so far that's going very well. And then there's another small component. There's, I think it's because I put together the kits maybe, but it's an access wellness service. And that is a kit that has like a scale, a blood pressure monitor, a pulse oximeter, and a forehead thermometer. And people can check those out for 2 weeks and take those home and just monitor their health. If they have issues going on, or if they just want to stay on top of their health, they can check those out and go on. So we kind of have that sort of under the technology area. And then the other thing we talked about was just just kind of our infrastructure, where we do our backups, where our servers are. Are we doing multi-factor or not? Yes, we are doing multi-factor across the board. All those types of things. So I can go down that rabbit hole for hours. But if you have any questions, we can talk about that. Steve, it was a lot.
That was the big point. The other thing we did is that because the technology committee meets infrequently and there were new members on the committee, we tried to meet earlier. Typically the committee meets in May. We tried to meet in April to give people an opportunity to think about the technology budget lines because they hadn't really been thinking about those before. So Brian went through the components. The technology committee was kind of sent away to think about it, come back, and we'll talk about it in May in terms of what they feel about them. In terms of what Brian showed, it was really just cost of doing business. It's the stuff that we typically do. There are not a lot of big projects that are being funded or speculated in the coming year. We did talk about the what started off, I guess, is $1.25 million for technology improvement that's in the capital plan that was earmarked for one-time expenditures. Brian talked about the data storage upgrade that was part of that. But we also talked about some of the other uses for that, things like potentially upgrading our self-check machines, and also talked about a new service outlet concept that we've been talking about with the new KCI airport. So what we've been talking about doing is installing kiosks. They have these kiosks in airports with other libraries. San Antonio was one of the first libraries to do it. That it would sort of be in these common areas behind the gates, behind the security gates, where people could charge devices, but could also download ebooks, download audiobooks, things like that for their trips. And we've actually been talking with KCI about this, and we are part of one of the vendor packages to provide this. We're not sure if that's going to happen in 22-23 or in 23-24, but we've started working on this as a way to kind of help our customers who are flying in and out of KCI, but also, to John's point that we were talking about before, increasing the visibility of librarianship. And just helping people realize the library can also help you on your travels too. So we talked a little bit about that budget item as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. After we were finished, Lori and Brian and I walked around and we looked at all of the things with on and off switches, which I think Lori liked. And
yeah.
and then we were finished. So Lori, what did I miss? What else would you like to share?
I was just going to say, one of the things that was, I was concerned was, more about cybersecurity. And I think Brian and you did a great job of addressing that we are diversified with our data to whereas, we're very protected. And that was kind of that thing that was concerning me, from our disaster recovery to our hosting to all of that. So I felt confident that you answered my questions and we were able to address that. And very exciting to hear about the library and how we're going with the airport. And I think you covered everything very quickly. Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
Well, just a quick comment about the fact that a lot of these services that are giving immense help to people that are most in need in our library district are being funded outside the library budget. And somehow, I think if those are really needed services, we ought to be thinking about ways to fund those inside the budget, I think that's the kind of thing we ought to be asking for charitable funds to do. But I think we could multiply the number of devices that we use to help people, the hotspots are particularly in mind, by budgeting some. I don't think there'd be a thing wrong with us budgeting. It's just like we buy books, we buy hotspots. And I think it's something that we need to look at.
But that is actually in this coming budget that we've moved from grant to ongoing funding.
Okay, but I would hope we wouldn't stop, going after the grant funding on that either. So just a comment.
Any other questions, comments? Brian, I had a question. With regard to the health.
The access wellness.
Devices, yeah. I guess background of the question I'm going to ask is, about half year ago, there was an introduction to this and Matt Stewart was there. And he has blood pressure taken. It was like 180.
Oh, yeah.
I was there.
Remember that.
Yeah, well, because equally high for the other number in the component. And then they said, we'll come back at the 9 o'clock hour. You came back at the 9 o'clock hour. And a very healthy, athletic, trim fellow had 180 over another astronomical amount. My concern is this, and this question to Phil. What happens instead of you having a young, healthy person who can kind of laugh it off? We have an elderly person who has low blood pressure. And the devices have an artificially high amount, which is inaccurate. And the person then, again, with reasonable reliance, the buzzword, reasonable reliance, says, okay, my oxygen level, my blood pressure are all fine, and there's a catastrophic cardiac event. Okay, still a question. What exposure do we have? Or do we have any kind of indemnification or hold harmless from the
Yes.
appliance manufacturers?
It's in the instruction booklets that basically say that you should seek a physician or a doctor to discuss your results, and these aren't meant to be these aren't meant to be final numbers. You need to discuss those with your doctors. There is some verbiage in the instruction
Okay.
booklet about that.
Again, the other thing I'd suggest is that it'd be very, very, very that it's not something they should exclusively rely upon.
Right.
Because
That's the verbiage in there. We wouldn't put those out without.
not in a fine print and a footnote. I'm writing down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Jim and I worked on some language to go in with it, that this is not the library, this is
just meant to help.
considered to assist you, and the library has no responsibility.
Nothing wrong with trial lawyers.
Yep. Yep.
Good. Okay, anything else more on technology?
Just a comment. I've said I'm on that committee, and I honestly learned a lot. It was like overload for a little bit, but I really appreciate the way you guys unpacked everything with the hotspots and the Chromebooks and these units we're talking about. I think we had 20 of those.
Access wellness is 20.
Yeah, 20 of those blood pressure systems and things. And so we all know that technology is where the future's at. And so there's a very significant aspect of this particular committee. And Brian, thanks for, all of you do to lead this thing up, head this thing up, and make sure we're all in the loop on that. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot just listening to everything. It was quite a lengthy meeting. It was very in-depth. So
I can do that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We really tried to take those hotspots and Chromebooks and turn them into a flexible service, because we were used to people coming in the doors and using that. And when we went through the lockdowns and everything else that happened, and some people don't want to come back to being in the buildings. And so we're like, hey, we got to do something to turn this so people can still have access. It's like you said, it's a super
good job.
service. So, thank you.
If I could, one last thing on the Access Wellness Kit. The disclaimer language is not only packaged in with the kit itself, but it's also in the catalog. So if you were to go in where you want to reserve it, it's there as well, and on the webpage that kind of talks about it. So we're disclaiming all of this.
Yeah, so as long as there's adequate disclosure and notice, that I'm assuming that's suffice. Subject to. Good. Okay.
Just one other quick, I think Steve Potter shared this with me at one point, but Steve might give Frank Callamar, the general estimate of what an in-service location at KCI is, so that we don't understand it's something like some of the other things that appear on our
Yeah, actually,
dashboard.
Brian and I were talking about and what did you say that those kiosks were? They're in the tens of thousands of piece.
That's around 10,000 each.
Like 10,000.
They're touchscreen. They're a big, like that monitor turned portrait, but maybe even a little bit bigger. They can do video and audio. They can do all that kind of stuff.
And we've
They do
talked about
charging.
a couple of locations, 2, 3, 4 locations, something like that.
So thank you. I just didn't want people to think that we were
No, it's not
another
no.
architecture engagement and JE done. And
It's not 7 figures, no.
So.
Not even 3 figures. Anything else on tech?
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Next matter is the ad hoc committee on succession. Circumstances are now that the policy provision, section 326 applies, and that has the current elected president, which is yours truly, and the current appointed chair of the personnel committee, which is Joycelyn, established a committee. Joycelyn and I had a chance to meet with Steve, and I think very wise recommendation is that the committee be constituted initially by the current officers, which are Michael, John, and myself. It was then suggested that Joycelyn join. And with the initial recommendation, a very important numerical factor was raised, is that is when you have 3, we don't have an issue of a tie vote. And to avoid an even number, Michelle has joined the committee. So that's the 5 people constitute the committee. We met with Jennifer and Steve, and we initially reviewed the qualifications that were sought for when Steve has his current position. I believe they were last modified in 2013, and they were really quite exhaustive. And they were not prioritized, but nonetheless, each one of these elements would apply at some time during the performance of the CEO's job. Immediately into the meeting, 2 things became absolutely apparent, and that's the need for outside help. One is a labor law attorney, and the other one was a search firm. I think it's beyond the capacity, certainly myself, and I feel safe to say for the committee to undertake this effort on our own. So the need of a search committee became apparent, and Steve had some context, which if you'd cover. Yeah. And then also another thing is that is the absolute necessity, in my opinion, for a labor law attorney. To make sure, especially that we don't veer into the areas that are prescribed conduct under, in my opinion, very reasonable and just laws on the discrimination area and everything else. And John and I were discussing at one time that there's when he was in a committee or involved in the committee that had a search undertaken, and a very innocent, friendly, cordial comment was made, but it went right to the heart of a protected class of persons, and all that does is raise issues that I think we need a lawyer, a labor law attorney, to absolutely be with us and, as need be, to gag us any further. One lawyer was recommended. I had a chance to visit with her, and it has absolute sterling credentials, and she has presented an engagement letter to help us facilitate everything in this effort. I looked up initially, and it's really their website did not do justice for her credentials. But anyway, I had a chance to have a very, very good visit with her, and I will be presenting a motion later on that we engage her services. And we have our next meeting scheduled for the 25th. So 25th. Jennifer, Steve, Michael, John, please supplement correct what I just had.
No, I think that right. I think that's an accurate description of where we are.
Right.
And the cautions that we have to take.
Well, and to the point, I mean, we were just talking about all the open positions with no incumbent. That's what Jennifer's team needs to be focused on, not trying to find a person to sit in this chair. And so that's why working with a search firm is also important. I've talked to a couple, I've identified 2 firms that are interested in working with the board. to help fill this position, and got some preliminary pricing, and I'm going to be sharing all of those with the committee. The bottom line is that that there are a lot of openings right now. There are a lot of people that are moving around in the library profession. And so engaging somebody as soon as possible is a good thing, if that can happen. In general, and when I was speaking with the firms, I've always just sort of had this feeling that when you're talking about, there are about 75 libraries. We're about the 75th library in terms of size, depending upon any way you want to slice it. We're about the 75th library in North America. And of those libraries, there's a handful that are independent. Most of them tend to be part of a city or a county government. So when you start looking at an executive director of a governmental unit with a master's degree in library science and other qualifications, it's probably about 100 people is your potential universe of individuals who might be looking for a new job opportunity, have the experience, and looking to move. That's a needle in a haystack. And so involving somebody to help with that is beneficial. The other conversation that we've had is that for internal candidates, so if internal candidates come forward and say they're interested in this position, using a process with an outside firm helps legitimize those internal candidates so that it doesn't look like we just handed it to the first person that was seen in the hallway, that this person actually went through a process and earned the job. And so that's another reason to engage a search firm. So I'll be bringing those firm recommendations to the committee on the 25th, and we can talk in much more detail. And then, and in terms of the attorney that Ron was talking about, Jennifer and I have worked with her quite a lot over the past few years. In fact, Phil recommended that we might want to have sort of somebody that the staff could talk to make sure we get our ducks in a row. Before the wrongful termination lawsuits come, and Ms. Patterson has been working with us for a long time in that respect, and I think she's fabulous personally. So,
yeah, that was my impression too. Just a few short visits. Any other questions? Points to raise? Okay, I'd be very. Look, I have the engagement letter here. Jennifer.
I think it's in board docs as well. If I'm
okay,
it's in there. Yeah, so,
there we go.
So people can
just to skim over this very, very quickly, 20 seconds. Her hourly rate is $300 an hour. Much of the work would be done by paralegals and associates at a lower rate. And she will be with us, hopefully in person, at all of the meetings of the committee. You have the first page of the engagement letter, and I'd be very happy to entertain any motion that we engage her and I sign the engagement letter getting her on board.
And that's for the purposes of
for the purposes that's set forth on the screen, yeah.
Process.
Who wants to be first?
I would move.
I'll second it.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we engage the services for legal services as set forth on the screen. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Abstaining? Thank you very much. I assure you there's a great sense of relief on this committee. Okay, we have next.
Mr. Chairman, before you move
Yes,
off this
please.
topic, can I raise something? With this?
Oh, of course.
I appreciate the work. In my mind, this is the most important work that this board will do this year or some other. And my preference would be that we deal with this topic at the beginning of the meeting. And so it's not at the very end of the meeting where we've gone through so many other things and our attention might be waning and our focus isn't in that, because this is the most critical decision and our greatest responsibilities as trustees in the selection of the next president and CEO. So as we construct future agendas, I would like for this item to be the first item that we address as a board.
Good point.
Got it.
We'll do that, sure. Thank you. That's a sentiment I'm sure that Mark feels right now.
Yeah, I think the next one I'm talking about the search firm though was to see if, but we didn't actually bring the description. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that's something we want to take a vote on or if that's something we can hold off until the next meeting.
Oh, let's switch to the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah, cover it, yeah.
Okay. So librarians report, and we can get to Mark now.
Fantastic.
Steve, do you have anything?
No, you're up.
Okay, you're first, and
I'll fill in later.
thank you. Good evening. My name is Mark Livingood. I'm director of the Story Center. I've been with the Story Center now just over 4 years. It's great to be able to talk with you about the Story Center and what we are working on. I want to introduce you to the Story Center, or reintroduce you in some cases. Then I want to highlight one of our key programs that we've had a great amount of success with over the past few years. And then I want to talk about the next chapter of the Story Center, because we are at this really interesting place of the evolution of the Story Center with the opening of the historic home, but also kind of emerging out of the pandemic and figuring out how we're going to engage people in person. So Cody, are you with me? Next slide, please.
Yes.
All right, great.
Thank you, Mark.
So as you may know, the Story Center opened in 2013, kind of along the same time with Woodneath. The Woodneath branch opened in June of 2013. And then the Story Center opened roughly 5 to 6 months later with the delivery of the espresso book machine, which is kind of a key milestone in the beginning of the Story Center. Until this past November, the Story Center staff had offices in the Woodneath branch. There was one office not far from the collection and the espresso book machine, and then I had another office in the other part of the library. Then when the house opened to the public in December after the event in November, the dedication event, we moved our offices onto the second floor of the house. There are key parts of the Story Center that are still in the Woodneath branch, including the collection, which has about 2,500 items, and then also including the espresso book machine, both of which were too large and too heavy to move into the house. So the second floor is primarily office space. There are 5 of us who work for the Story Center, 3 full-time and then 2 part-time. Next slide, please. Great. So we begin with a couple of assumptions. One is that storytelling is a basic way that people communicate. We all tell stories at some point. You can walk outside, tell stories. We do them on the kitchen table. We do them informally. We do them more formally. And we also believe that everyone has a story, whether that is a historical story, contemporary story, something imagined, something factual that actually happened, a personal experience. So we work with people who have those stories, but also come to some kind of point where they want to tell that story in some way. So what we do is we provide those services and that support, and those resources for people who, like I said, are at a point now where they want to tell a story, whether they want to tell word of mouth, whether they want to write it down, or now increasingly they want to tell it in a digital environment too. So we work with these 3 words in mind: create, share, and connect. And all of our programming or our services are somehow connected to these 3 verbs. We have a collection of 2,500 items, like I said, that are full of resources to help people with publishing, or collections of folk tales, or books of inspiration, talking about writing technique, all kinds of things. They circulate just like normal books, all the books in the library do. We have the espresso book machine, which I mentioned. We also have Woodneath Press, which really hits that share component of our mission. And these are services that we provide to the public. The espresso book machine is available to anybody for a fee or a modest cost. You think of it as a resource for the public, not as a revenue source for the library. And then we have Woodneath Press, which publishes books that are by local authors and feature local content. Then we also have a whole series of educational programs that we do. And on average, we do about 10 to 12 programs a month. And actually, that number has actually increased, I think, in the last year and a half. We have done speaker series events with Rainy Day Books. We do one-off kind of programs that are in response to customers' interests and needs that they tell us that they want to pursue. And then a core part of our educational programming is our certificate program. Cody, next slide, please. Certificate program on any given month of those 10 to 12 programs that we do, roughly half of those are for the certificate program. And so what is a certificate program? It's a series of 12 free programs that help customers develop skills and knowledge for creating and sharing stories. We try to present those twice yearly. So people, each one of those programs is presented twice, so that people have an opportunity to kind of enter the program whenever they want. There are 2 tracks. There's an oral track that I was mentioning, and then there's a written track. The focus of those 12 programs is really on the creation phase. And again, you would think of that person who has an idea, but that person doesn't really know what to do, just something they've been thinking about. So we provide them the educational opportunity for them to create that. Then they might want to develop that somehow. So we provide them programs that look at the techniques of writing. For example, how do you structure a narrative arc? If you're an oral storyteller, how do you talk about dialogue? How do you present yourself in a situation where you have a live audience? And then we also know that a lot of our customers are interested in the kind of business side of things. So we provide them programs that look at marketing. What do I do with my book now that I've written my book? What kind of a publisher do I search out? Do I want to publish it myself? Do I want to send it to Simon Schuster? Would I rather do it with the University of Missouri Press? We provide them those options, and kind of, if you think about reader's advisory, that's something the library does, we kind of think of this as like storyteller's advisory, and allows them to explore the options. The curriculum is all self-paced. People come into it when they're ready. People can leave. They extend it over a series of years. We keep track in the library's system. And then we ask them to do a capstone because we want them to be working toward a project. And so when the graduation rolls around in December of every year, they will perform a 5 to 7 minute story, or they will write something and they'll read that. And then we also give them an opportunity. Sorry, Jim. Got a little. Also give them an opportunity to publish in something that we publish in-house as part of Woodney Press's Community Voices, which is kind of our in-house literary. Those are the requirements. This program has been funded primarily by the Kaufman Foundation since it started, and we've been offering it in partnership with Metropolitan Community College, but primarily Maple Woods. Next slide, Cody, please. Thank you. So how do the numbers shake out? Right now, as of last week, we have 345 people currently enrolled at all stages of this. 133 oral storytellers, 212 writers. Writers always are more frequent and more popular than oral storytellers. In FY 2019, that year before the pandemic, we offered 67 programs and attended by 787 participants. And I just want to put a footnote on this, is that this 67 programs are specifically for the certificate program. The Story Center actually probably did about 130 programs that year, which would have included the speaker series events that we do with Rainy Day Books. So on average, we do about 130 programs a year, 10 to 12 per month, like I mentioned. To date, we've done 68 programs this fiscal year with about 1,200 participants and then 23 different presenters. And so it's interesting to us when we look at the number of participants who have increased. And I think some of that is attributable to the virtual environment. And so in some ways, virtual presentation has lifted for some people a geographic access to participation. And that even includes within the service area. because we were getting people who would drive to Woodney hour and a half for one of our programs. But now in a virtual environment, we're getting those people, same people who might live in Lone Jack or up in Weston, who can participate virtually as long as they have some sort of access to Zoom. So it's very interesting how that's happened. During those 4 years, Katina Jones has been keeping the statistics for the Kauffman grant. And one of the questions in there is, have you reported developing new skills or knowledge related to storytelling? And so on average, our response has been 99.2% of people who have responded positively to that. We've done 4 graduations. Steve has been at the graduations. We do them in December. And then we've had 78 graduates, 34 oral storytellers, and 44 writers during that time. Cody, next slide, please. Thank you. Now, just to give you a sense of who these people are and what they do with this, right? The picture is of 4 people who are involved, have been involved in the storytelling certificate program, performing at the State Fair last August as part of our bicentennial program. The man on the right is a poet, and then Joyce Slater in the middle on the right is one of our coaches and regular presenters, and then 2 on the left are participants and completed the certificate program. Recently, we've had 1 graduate go on to publish in the Kansas City Star, St. Joseph News Press, Platte County Magazine, Platte County Citizen, and Genealogy Today. She's a writer. We've had another graduate who is a graduate of the oral storytelling track, who is a textile artist also. She's been performing and showcasing African-American history in museums and classrooms, and including down at the Bunker Arts Center, which is in Kansas City. And then the 3rd graduate had a very different approach, where she was involved in the program as a storyteller, but also a story listener. And so she's formed a nonprofit, Listening to Change, which offers listening and communication training, coaching, and workshops for leaders and teams. Very different kind of approach to what we're offering. Next slide, please. I wanted to I asked a couple of people who've been involved just for some feedback about the stories, or about the storytelling certificate program. George Pettigrew has been involved in the storytelling certificate program from the beginning. And I want to read to you what he emailed to me recently. I was an accomplished speaker from military service corporations and as special assistant to the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. Leaving a presentation at the MCPL Blue Springs branch in February 2018, I fortunately picked up a copy of Beyond the Books. And you know what Beyond the Books is. There, I first learned of the oral and written storyteller certification programs. In December of 2018, I received my first certification, oral storyteller. And the following December, I earned my written storyteller certification. Today, and directly due to the certification training I received from the Story Center, I am a presenting member of the Missouri Humanities Council Speakers Bureau. I still present for MCPL at the branches. I have spoken multiple times at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, for the National Park Service at Whiteman Air Force Base, Fort Leavenworth, and many more. I can never fully express how indebted I always will be to the Story Center and MCPL. George specializes in historic interpretation, and specifically of Buffalo Soldiers, of which his great-grandfather was one. So, next slide, please. Thank you. I also wanted to ask a presenter about her perspective on the certification program. Laura Packer has been telling stories professionally for 30 years. She's an award-winning storyteller, used to live in the Kansas City area, now lives in the Twin Cities, still presents programs for us virtually, and comes down. We'll come down here from time to time to present in person. So she's been part of the Story Center since its inception, walking through the historic house before any work was done and before the name Story Center was on the MCPL website. The Story Center has become a community hub for storytelling education and has made these resources available to anyone who wants to participate regardless of experience or income. The Story Center embodies some of what is best about public libraries. As a regular presenter, the Story Center has great meaning to me. I've been encouraged to think deeply about storytelling and to think deeply about what it means to be an educator. It's been empowering for me as a working artist and as someone dedicated to helping others find their voice. Next slide, please. So where are we? That's a synopsis of the certification program. Now, I mentioned that we're kind of at a new chapter for the Story Center. And one of the things that we need to do, and I have been working on, I think we're at a place right now where we really can work on this intensely, is to offer a digital storytelling track, the certificate program. And I'll explain why real soon. This has been something that we've been working on. Last summer, we had offered a series of digital storytelling programs, very successful, that resulted in a kind of a public event, public in a virtual sense event in September with people that participated in some workshops, and those videos are posted on our YouTube site. Another thing we'll be working on is continuing revising our programming model to incorporate virtual and in-person programs as the library continues to move into more in-person programming. And then another thing that's really exciting for us is now that we've moved into the house and have been occupying it for roughly 4 months, how are we going to use the house, and not only the house, but also the surrounding landscape of 33 acres as inspiration and as a setting for original programs. Okay, next slide, please, Cody. Thank you. So we've started to do that. We had our first in-person programs the very beginning of March, and we're starting to incorporate them back in. And these are pictures of 3 recent programs that were just earlier this month. One, Listening to Place, which was a program with Megan Kaminsky about, for poets specifically, about developing the sensibilities to use place, developing poetry. You can see they're on the south porch of the house right here, and right behind it is the auditorium. So it was a nice enough day for them to get outside and use that. This is another program that we did that's still there. It's an exhibit of paintings by a portrait painter from Kansas City named Patty Streeper. And she focuses in the paintings on women who have led by story. And the portraits of, these are 4 of the 11 portraits that are on display. It's a different kind of approach and look at storytelling, but she gave an artist talk, and she's pictured here in the main program room on the ground floor of the house. And then this program down here is a program, it's actually a performance by Mary Schmidt, who is a first person narrator, or she specializes kind of like George Pettigrew in historic stories. She's put together a performance based on the life of Naomi Crouch. And Naomi Crouch, as you may know, is the matriarch of the Crouch family who sold the Woodneath property to the library in 2008. And if you get a chance to see this, she's going to do the performance again on April 28th. I really recommend that you take the time to go over there and spend an hour to see this really unique performance. You can see this is in the Crouch family reading room on the ground floor of the house. She's dressed in period costume, and she's done a lot of historic research to craft a really interesting presentation about Naomi's life, but also about the history of Woodneath and the house in particular. So these are the kind of programs that we have been doing in the house now. And again, I mentioned that it really provides a very unique setting for us to present these kind of programs. Next slide, please. Oh, that's not mine.
Oh, that's our next one. That was.
Oh, that's okay. Well, let me explain it to you. There is a slide here that shows the picture of the Story Center studio. And there is a room in the house that is designated studio space. This is a room which has an incredible amount of potential. And we're in the process now. This is kind of be that hub spot, I think, where I mentioned that digital storytelling component. And it finally provides us a location where we can provide those resources for people to get in and tinker and play with things to complement the instruction that we can give in the educational program. It's also providing a setting for the Memory Lab, which is a project that we're going to be launching, we hope, or in August, which will allow customers to come in and bring their families' photographs, their families' letters, et cetera, and digitize those. So it's all about family history, provide that place for them. We received a grant from the Missouri State Library to fund some of the equipment for this. So that's going to help us outfit the studio space and provide the service for people. And then longer term, we'll have the equipment to continue that project. So that's a very exciting space. We're still working on pulling some things together in there, but it will also allow us to work toward that digital end and help people share their stories digitally moving forward. My last slide was I hope this gives a clear idea of how the Story Center is helping to fulfill specifically that third strategic priority of the library, which is to help people create and share their stories. And I'm happy to take any questions. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be able to share the news about the stories.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions of Mark? I might just have my experience with the Story Center. I had a chance to take some of the certificate programs, and I want to talk about George. George and I are on the writing program at the VFW National Headquarters, and through the oral certification program that George went through is absolutely just amazing. He's a Navy veteran, and he shares the experience of the Buffalo Soldiers and the incredible, fierce, heroic warriors that they were, especially in the opening of the West, a story that is really not very much told. And I've heard him present a number of times, including at the Veterans Program at the Genealogy Center and elsewhere. And in visiting with him, he also gives presentations at schools, and kids that don't have that cavalry army story of the Buffalo Soldiers is brought to them in ways that a textbook never could even possibly do. And it's thanks to the program that you guys operate at Whitney's. And that's just one of many, many other areas. And other people in the writing program have stories that are unique to this area of Clay County, over there in North area, Clay County. Actually tell the stories of the development and history of the Kansas City metro area at a time when it was really quite distant from downtown Kansas City on the other side of the river. So I think the gift of this through people who go through the program is just beyond measure. Another thing too, I guess my last point is, if you want to see something truly magic, I mean, we're talking about Harry Potter type magic, take a look at that book printing machine. It goes in from blank pieces of paper, somebody puts in a thumb drive, and you literally have a bound text coming out in 5 minutes, something like that. Pretty amazing stuff.
Thank you. Mark, thank you for coming and talking about the program. This has been something I really did resolve to do, is to try to do our best to illustrate what it is that we do. And hopefully we're taking a little bit of time to talk about our program has been beneficial to you. One of the things I always wanted to, George is a good friend. I like George. He always bugs me whenever I see him. He's a good guy. But one of the other stories that I've heard is sort of the mashup between Square One. Remember, Morgan was here a couple of months ago, and the Story Center. So what we end up having a lot of times is that our entrepreneurs and business folk will end up learning how to do sales pitches through oral storytelling techniques and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of residual add-on that occurs as well. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being here. It is quarterly statistics time. And so Jim, can you give us a real quick down of quarterly statistics?
I will do my best. So I'm going to start with the bad news, which is that you have to listen to me instead of Katina. Katina has left us. Katina is off to bigger and better things. She has joined PLA, the Public Library Association, to manage some national statistics programs. So always good when somebody leaves you for a really good reason, right? So, okay. But in her stead, I will attempt to do this. And she's actually watching, I know, because she's been texting me. She wants to make sure I'm not going to mess it up. Okay, Cody, can you do the next slide, please? Okay. Mark just got done talking about one of the strategic priorities. I think just as a quick review, remember up here is our strategic model. It starts with the pillars on the bottom. That's all the inputs, the core work, that's our outputs. And then, we're talking about outcomes up on top with our 3 strategic priorities, which are just highlighted portions of our core work. So we measure the core work kind of through 3 major areas: active customers, customer satisfaction, and customer use, otherwise known as transactions. So we're going to go through those real quick. Cody, next slide, please. Start with active customers. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so keep in mind all the way through this, we're coming out of the pandemic, so all the numbers look weird. When you see big growth, a lot of times that's what you're seeing you're seeing growth out of the pandemic. Sometimes it's growth back to a number that we had prior to, is what we're looking at. So active cardholders, you can see in quarter 3, January, February, March, we're at 265,000 active cardholders. Our strategic plan goal, 320,000. Now, right before the pandemic, we were at 337,000. So obviously, throughout the course of that, we dropped off. We're adding back. You can see new card registration. We added 10,000 new card holders last month. So we're going to keep working our way back up to that, hopefully back up to that 335,000 number, or at least the 320. Market penetration and cardholder retention. I'm going to skip those for now because actually the next slide goes into those a little bit better. And then active student accounts are the last thing we want to highlight here. Remember, we're up to about, Susan, is it like 17, 18 of our school districts?
15 or 16.
15 or 16 of our school districts now.
Still trying.
Students have active cards that their number is associated with their student number at school, so they know how to use it. 65% of those are being used right now. So we're doing really well in, some people say what's the engagement that we have around schools? Well, I think this shows a lot of the engagement at schools is we've got 65% of our student accounts being active. Okay, next slide, Cody. Okay, so here's back to that market penetration and retention. This one is called out because this is one of the few things we can compare ourselves with other libraries. So you can see this, we do this through our Savannah platform, which is our CRM system. You can see here the gray lines are mid-continent, the green are other libraries in our budget category, blue in our population category, and orange in the Savannah system as a whole. So you can see we're pretty consistently higher than our peers in terms of percent of active households. However, this 38% of active households was closer to 48, 49% prior to the pandemic. So this is still some of the work we have to do to go back. And in terms of cardholder retention, you can see we still compare favorably. That 40% cardholder retention, which means 12 months to 24 months after. So an active cardholder has used their card in the last year. This is, we get a new cardholder, how many of them are still using it 12 to 24 months later? Right now we're sitting at 40%. Again, that number was closer to 60 prior to the pandemic. So still working our way up in some of these numbers. Okay, next slide, Cody, please. Okay, customer satisfaction is the next one. We use the concept of Net Promoter Score. and then kind of, what is the word I'm looking for here? We amplify that with surveys around different elements of what we do. Cody? Okay, so Net Promoter Score, just a reminder for everybody. Net Promoter Score is something kind of broadly used across a bunch of industries. It's your promoters minus your detractors. That's your Net Promoter Score. Promoters are people who would say, would give you a 9 out of 10 on the question on a scale of 0 to 10. How likely are you to recommend that others use Mid-Continent Public Library? If you give us a 9 or 10 on that question, you're a promoter. If you give us a 6 or below, you're a detractor. Your promoter score is promoters minus detractors. Cody, next slide, please. Okay, where we started this strategic plan at was 91.8. Our goal, I mean, we don't have a lot of room to grow there, right? So our goal was to get to 92. Our Q3 actual, we're at 90.7. We had gotten down to as low as about 90, kind of at one part of the pandemic. Now, the other thing that's important here is it's not just pandemic related. Like, we've had a lot of buildings closed over the last few years. So obviously, we're not providing excellent service right in the moment to the people whose building is closed. That is sometimes reflected in some of this. We've done 4,800 in the most current cycle of these surveys. The word cloud you see at the right is all of the words that pop up in these surveys. So, what do you like about the library? The library is number one, but obviously books is big. If you start looking at slightly smaller words, you see a lot of staff. People are helpful, that sort of thing. Okay, one of our supplementary statistics, after programs, we survey people. 96% of people surveyed rated their library program in person and virtual, because remember, we pivoted to doing a lot more virtual programming during the pandemic, as very good or excellent. Cody, next slide, please. Okay, and then the last one is transactions. Okay, so this is our use of library services. Once upon a time, like when I started here, that number was just circulation. That's all we thought about. Now there's a lot of different things, and we'll go into that. Next slide, please, Cody. Okay, so our customer transactions. Our goal for 2021 was 9 million. Now this is down. I mean, this goes back to that whole same argument. We've got on the one hand, pandemic. On the other hand, we've had libraries closed now for 5 years, basically. And so that automatically puts a dent in what you're going to be able to achieve. The year we started the building program, the year before that, we were at about 13 million in total transactions. So last year, we set a goal for 9 million. We got to 9.8. We set a goal this year to increase. We weren't really sure when we were setting the goal where things were going to go. We set it a little bit conservatively at 10.6 million. And to date, we're at 8.9. Now, assuming that's the same number, assuming we do the same number in the last quarter we did in the first three, that's closer to 12 million than 10.6. So I think we can expect to be at least over 11 and a half at the least. Okay, let's see, what does this note say? Yeah, so basically just that, we're going to anticipate as we set the goal for the next year that Lee Summit is coming back online, Blue Ridge is back online, Boardwalk will Green Hills will come back online in probably the first couple of months of the next fiscal year. So we're going to need to set a more aggressive goal on transactions for the upcoming year. Okay. Oh, wait, let me go back real quick just in case anybody forgot. In this transactions, we've got the circulation of physical items, digital items. We've got database usage. We've got usage of MCPL created content. A lot of that's genealogy related. Library PC use and Wi-Fi session use, program attendance here, and then branch services, and that's things like meeting room checkouts and reference questions, things like that. All right, next slide, please, Cody. Okay, here's kind of a breakout. You can see this is one of the charts where you're really seeing like ridiculous increases, but that's because in the first quarter of 2021, in most of January, we were doing curbside only. In most of February, we were doing curbside and technology services in branches. And then kind of about the 3/4 of the way through February, we opened pretty much fully back up. But so that's a greatly reduced quarter than what we're talking about right now. But one thing I think that's worth looking at though is like use of virtual resources. Those are still increasing from that time, even though those were fully open at that moment. So I think that's important to see that people are continuing to increase their use of virtual resources as well as all the physical resources. And program attendance, we're not fully back up to speed in programming yet. We are, we've been doing programming now for a couple of months, but it's still a reduced schedule from what we're normally doing as we try to ramp back up. All right, Cody, very last one. Okay, this just kind of shows the trends over time. You can see the stars where we are here. That's compared to last year. So obviously that's a pretty good increase. And then last quarter. But I think what's probably most important here is when you start comparing kind of this quarter to this quarter 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And you're starting to see us get back kind of to the time period that's pre-pandemic, but still during construction period. Until we get out of both, it's going to be hard to kind of look at historical numbers. And that is my report.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
And so I think the last thing we had, I had 3 real quick things to report to you from the librarian's report. One of them is legal service area. This is something that happens once every 10 years. We get an update from the Missouri State Library concerning what our official legal service area is and the population of that. And so our population now is 840,292 people, 840,292. That is an increase of 10% or 78,000 people from 2010 and 25% increase from the year 2000. There are, of course, 2 other districts within our counties, and North Kansas City Public Library is up 6%, but that's 400 people. And the Kansas City Public Library is also up 6%, but that's 14,000 people. Just as an FYI, Platte County has grown by population by 84% since the year 1990. And both Jackson and Clay counties have a bit more than 100,000 people each now compared to 1990. All of these numbers are really important in terms of our peer group and figuring out how many people we serve. Also important for allocation for state aid and the out-of-state athletes and entertainers tax. So it's kind of like Congress, where we get our new census numbers every 10 years. This is our number. Other thing I want to, announcement number 2, power check devices. So Mid-Continent Public Library collaborated with Kansas City Public Library and Evergy, and we just launched a new service where customers can borrow a device from us, and it helps them measure energy use and how efficient appliances are in their home. The devices, so you determine if your house is running at high efficiency or low efficiency and try to address that. The devices themselves are currently housed at Antioch, Grandview, and Raytown, but they can be sent to any location in our library system for you to use. And this is probably one service that you probably didn't know about. Frankly, I'd forgotten that we were doing this until just today. We have a lot of interesting services like these, like the Access Wellness Kits that we talked about a little bit, and the Chromebooks for checkout. We also have the Wi-Fi to go, remote printing. One thing that a lot of you may or may not remember that we do is fishing poles. We check out fishing poles for people to try fishing with their families. We have Career Online High School, where people can get a certified high school diploma and career training through the public library. So I want to challenge you. I want to give you a homework assignment. What I'd like for you all to do is go to our website and find something you didn't know that we offered. and then prepare just to mention that at the May board meeting. Find it real easy, just mymcpl.org/services, and that'll list all of our services. Find something you didn't know that we offered and just tell us about it. There's so much more to libraries now than just warehousing and distributing books, and I think that'll really open your eyes. Last thing that I wanted to talk about was our lawsuit with Unilever that we've collaborated with the Independent School District. The court denied the county's motion to set aside the default judgment on the case on April the 4th. There's no, as I understand it, and I'm sure Mr. Grubaugh will correct me, there's no direct appeal route for a default judgment, but the motion to set aside is appealable. Our feeling, or what Mr. Grubaugh shared with me, is that there's a very high burden on the county to justify an appeal, and it must establish the court's order was arbitrary and capricious, for example, in order to get this overturned. It's a pretty high burden for the county. So as of right now, everything is still pending. The county has essentially filed the paperwork, and we are still just playing the waiting game. But based on what we're seeing, it's, it's hard to.
Reasonably optimistic.
Reasonably optimistic. Good words. So that's where we are with my 3 items. And thank you, Jim and Mark, for helping to fill out the librarian's report.
Well, I'm happy to report that despite the lawsuit, we're still friendly with Jackson County.
Yeah. They're still giving us taxes, and they still answer our calls. So.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Right.
New business?
Right. There is one new business item that I think is important, and let me just tee this up real quickly, that Mr. Grubaugh has notified the Mid-Continent Public Library staff his desire to retire from active practice and to end his engagement as MCPL's attorney. It has been our practice to have an attorney for the board and for the library as an institution specifically focused on governance, contracting, and other similar municipal functions. Mr. Grubaugh routinely recommended special counsel for specific needs of the library when the library needed such expertise. It's not clear whether it's better to engage a law firm with broad subject matter expertise or a boutique firm focusing on the issues of governance. Last year, just in preparation, staff did develop an RFQ for legal services and board attorney if ever a need such arose, and that RFQ has been shared with the officers of the board. Having counsel assures the library is doing the right thing legally and underscores trust that the library believes the trust underlies success and that trust is built through integrity, fairness, and reliability. Staff recommends that the board commits to selecting and engaging a new board attorney as quickly as possible, allowing Mr. Grubaugh to orient the new counsel. In addition, staff would ask for a motion instructing staff to post the RFQ and to send it to attorneys and law firms identified by the board.
Any discussion? My thought on that is I think most of us are aware of law firms that I think offer a variety of services that the library could use. But I think it's very wise to let the legal community know that there's an RFQ. But I'd like to supplement that with other law firms other than what just identified by the board specifically. So if any individual trustee is aware of a firm they deem to be capable to serve in the needs of the library, that they advise that firm to raise that. So I guess we have a motion to.
Well, I can't make a motion. All I can do is recommend.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I was gonna
May
say.
I ask a question?
Please,
Can I
yes.
ask a question? So I know that we're hiring a lawyer, and I'm not sure how much that we're using him, or her. But my question would be: do we have enough business for a lawyer that we would need somebody even on staff full time? I know that we're hiring another lawyer for another job, but I just didn't know if we had like extra business or how much we're using a lawyer's services monthly or so.
No, I don't think you need an attorney on staff.
No.
The biggest issue always for an organization of any sort of this size is in my belief, is employee relations law. But you can handle that. You have been handling it on a as needed basis, on an hourly basis. On those few occasions when you do get sued, you have insurance that covers it, and the insurance company provides you the attorney. So no, I don't think at this time, I think it would be a waste of your money to have anybody on staff full-time. An hourly basis is much easier to justify and provides more flexibility.
Laura, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So you have to entertain a motion to instruct the staff to post an RFQ to attorneys and law firms identified by the board. I'm assuming some are already identified. So who care to make that motion?
I'll so move.
So move second.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we direct staff as stated. So all in favor, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining. So staff will go out and disseminate the information to law firms. I'm certain that the staff knows also. But I think as we are aware of law firms that are broad enough to serve the needs, that would be, I think, helpful to get that information.
Once we have that posted, we will share that URL with everybody so
Great.
that they can easily share it throughout the community. But just as a point of personal privilege, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Thank you for your help.
I've been doing this a long time, and as I think I wrote you in the letter several years ago, you had asked me how long I intended to go on, and I said till at least 70. And I turned 72 the day before your June meeting. It's probably time for somebody else to get in here.
That's pretty young.
But it has been an immense pleasure and immense privilege to work with Mid-Continent. You are far and away my favorite client over the 47 years I've been doing.
Thank you.
And you have provided me with a greater range of issues. Just one of them, and it's been a long time ago now. There was a wrongful discharge case where the employee involved, it was a maintenance person, was riding in a car and decided, as a passenger, you had another employee driving, and decided he was a werewolf and started with his head out the window and tongue flapping in the air, and then bit the driver. So that was always one of my more interesting cases.
Wow.
Brian, I'm sorry about that. I don't think.
I'm one of the few that's been here long enough to actually have witnessed that.
Had to be an IT guy.
There is really nothing to say after that.
Maybe I need to go to the story center.
Yeah, I should be.
There you go.
Teresa, no visitors comments? Thank you.
Okay, announcements.
Your announcements are before you. I think just keep an eye on your committee meetings that are coming up. In terms of closures, of course, we'll be closed on Memorial Day. But otherwise, I think I'll just leave it short like that.
Mindful that it's 8 o'clock. Any trustee comments?
Would we adjourn? Second.
Yes.
That was quick.
It's unanimous.
Thank you so much.